Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Lots happened in sport the last couple of days. Obviously, we've had the announcement that Xavi has been announced as Barcelona's new manager. Al Sadd of Qatar have released him and allowed him to take up the role with Barcelona, replacing Ronald Koeman. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Newcastle's still hunting for a replacement for Steve Bruce. It's now Eddie Howe's job, I think. He is favourite to take over. Obviously, Unai Emery turned down the offer. I mean, Newcastle risk doing a Tottenham and prolonging their search. They need to get a manager in as soon as possible. They're second bottom, second worst defence in the Premier League, and they now have less than 2 months till the transfer window opens. So, in order for them to get some momentum and get out the bottom three, they need to get a manager as soon as possible. I think Eddie Howe would be a good fit for Newcastle United, and I will do a video on Newcastle United a bit later when we have more information, because it's the first round of the FA Cup this weekend. There's a live match on ITV in the UK, and then there's a live match tomorrow on the BBC. So I'll try and watch both games. Also, England women's rugby union, the Red Roses, are playing the second test against the Black Ferns of New Zealand. And of course, the record-breaking win last weekend. Can the Kiwis bounce back and try and regain, I think, a bit of pride? I think that was a record-breaking half-time deficit, record-breaking loss for the Black Ferns. I think it's a big thing. You learn more from a defeat than a victory. And of course, delayed World Cup next year. A lot of new faces for both squads. And of course, the US and Canada have had their little two-match test series, which the Canadians won last night with a very good win in the US, and they were down to 14 players for the last 18 minutes. So, and didn't concede any points after that. So the Canadian women looking quite dangerous. Be a good test for England when they play next weekend. And of course, the USA also play the England women at the end of the month in their autumn internationals. More important news, and that's to do with the racism scandal involving Rafiq at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. Michael Vaughan has been dropped from his BBC radio podcast. I will be getting onto the rugby league with the Ottawa Aces and the Canadian experiment, as I call it. I was very critical of the Toronto Wolfpack experiment, and when that all fell apart due to COVID, I was really sceptical of the Ottawa Aces playing in Canada. I know in North America they've got the North American Rugby League setting up. I will get to that briefly, but I want to talk about obviously the Yorkshire County Cricket Club and the racism scandal that's involved Michael Vaughan. But this is something that I think we'll get onto. It's now got members of Parliament involved. The Yorkshire situation, they've been stripped of test status, which will have an impact on those businesses around Headingley, considering the investment that Headingley has had as a sports venue, because also at Headingley you have the rugby league ground as well that the Leeds Rhinos play out. There's been a lot of investment there with rebuilding of both stadiums, which are linked stadiums. They're all part of one complex. So Leeds as a city has been hit hard by this scandal. Another unnamed player has come forward, and there's been a third player whose name passes me by, that long before Rafiq had his issues, has also raised some concerns. It's not pretty reading, if we're honest. I would say it's very similar to the Chicago Blackhawks scandal that's currently ongoing in the NHL, where there was a period of time where the culture of the team is clearly. And then you look at Jeffrey Boycott as well. I mean, he's on the board. I mean, the board has got to go, in my opinion. But the ECB have allowed a toxic situation to happen at Yorkshire, much like the NHL has allowed a toxic situation to develop over a long period of time at Chicago. It's come out, and it is what it is. In regards to the rugby league team, Cornwall, I think it's the wrong location for expansion. I think it doesn't help that the London Broncos have gone part-time. The London Scholars, I mean, they were obviously, the Ottawa Aces were originally in Hemel Hempstead. They were the Stags. They obviously went to relocate to Canada, and then they came back again. In regards to the Coventry Bears rebranding, they want to obviously reach a wider fan base in the Midlands, because they're the only club, I believe, that play at a decent level in the Midlands. I mean, there are others, but rugby league. I was just listening to the Fergo and the Freak podcast, and there's a lot of issues, I think, with rugby league in the UK and the RFL and the Super League. Our TV deal in this country is crap, and the quality level is crap. I'm not even denying it. The NRL is a far superior product. For all the NRL's flaws, far superior product. In regards to going to Cornwall, it's nice that yes, they are seeing the West Country. I think it's the wrong bit of the West Country. I think Bristol or Exeter. Exeter's obviously a sporting city. Bristol's a sporting city. They would have been probably better locations to put a start-up team or relocated team. Um, yes, you've got the. I mean, I think it's it'll be interesting to see how they play next season, and if there's lots of ex-rugby union talent that comes over. I wouldn't see. Cornwall, the Cornish Pirates have developed some really great rugby union players that have gone on to play in the Premiership and play at a high level. They've just never made it to the Premiership. So there might be an opportunity for some rugby union players to switch codes. And the West Country, West Devon to from North and West Devon and Cornwall is very underrepresented at professional level in sport. So it's nice to have that sporting investment. Whether it's the right sport to do it, I don't know. I really don't know. Cornwall, yes, financially as a region, it is the poorest county in the UK, lowest average salaries. I've discussed that on the History channel, on the other channel, when I've been discussing politics and I've got friends who live in the family who live in the West Country. When I'm discussing housing crisis politics, it is. There are some football clubs down there as well. And if you're obviously viewing outside of European soccer clubs, because I do have Australian and North American viewers. But yes, located Cornwall is a bit of a head scratcher to me. I'm not saying it's a bad decision. I don't think it's necessarily. It's a bit of a head scratcher, but was it working in Hemel Hempstead where they were before they relocated to Ottawa to then come back? Was it actually working in Hemel Hempstead? Was there that progression, considering that you have the Broncos and the Scholars in the Greater London area who are more established and play better? And the Broncos have had a far better crack at Super League and played in a Challenge Cup final. So, was it working in Hemel Hempstead? Is it working in Coventry? These are the questions that the RFL needs to answer. Um, I think, in regards to the cricket's got to go through some hard truths. I think Yorkshire as a county cricket club has got a toxic culture. Um, that's my opinion on it. Um, we've never heard allegations of any of the other top tier county um, county game having this problem. Just across the Pennines in Lancashire, for example, Durham, we've never heard of any allegations coming out of any of the other county cricket clubs in Division One or Division Two or in the lower levels ever having this issue. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but for multiple players who played in the same era, so in the 2000s and 2010s, to say, look, this was a culture issue. And then when you have someone like Jeffrey Boycott, who's got his own views, and he's a bit of a crust, if I'm going to be honest. I'm not a big fan of Jeffrey Boycott. I can't stand him, and it does raise questions. But I think this is a very parallel situation to what's happening in the NHL with the Chicago Blackhawks and related mess. It's still ongoing. There's still stuff coming out. There's still heads going to roll. I think the NHLPA, a lot of players have been critical of their union in regards to the dealing of the complaints of Carl Beach and the other unnamed player. Um, because in regards to the Chicago Blackhawks investigation, not only was Carl Beach, yes, he was playing for the AHL, affiliate, but was called up as cover during the playoffs should there be injuries or suspensions or illness for a player. So he was with the training squad, and he was on a two-way contract at the time. So therefore, if you are on a two-way contract and you still have NHL in your contract, you are part of the NHLPA. He was let down by the players' union. Several high-profile players, through their player representatives or through themselves during interviews. Robin Lehner, I think, is the most high-profile. Have been highly critical of the NHLPA, the Players Association. We could see further heads roll. In regards to the Yorkshire side of things, when it comes to cricket, different sport, admittedly, but the ECB, I'm highly critical of the ECB and their handling of a lot of issues within the sport, a lot of issues. But these aren't allegations that just came out yesterday, as in the player just didn't go, yeah, I've been bullied, racially abused, harassed, felt that I had an issue and it wasn't taken seriously. These are historical. This is going back nearly 20 years with another player. Rafiq, his first spell, not his second spell, his first spell. It makes me wonder why he went back there if he had such a toxic, horrible time the first time round. Was he hoping the situation changed? Now they've dragged Michael Vaughan into it, and now there is a witness that says he may have used, inappropriate comments towards Asian players. I like Michael Vaughan. I do. I think he was a great England captain. I think he's a great player. I think he's a great commentator. His knowledge on the game is pretty good. But if there's a negative culture there that's been ongoing for a long time, um, you slip into bad habits. Do I think Michael Vaughan is a racist? No. Do I think he's a bit stupid? Yes. But again, only 7 of the 49 complaints were upheld. So they're basically saying in 48 of them, you're lying, which is clearly not the case, because if they've upheld 7 of them, and then they're trying to mitigate the damage. So I think heads need to roll at Yorkshire. I mean, they need to be punished more. I mean, I feel sorry for the cricket fans in Leeds and around Yorkshire when they're losing their test status as a test ground and having that as a suspension, as a suspended punishment until changes are happening. They've got big international tests, one days and T20s coming up that will be at Headingley. That are fixture penciled in, because to get test status as a county cricket club, your ground has to meet certain requirements. Your cricket club has to meet certain requirements, and this could have far-reaching implications for the local area as well as the team. But I haven't read enough of the situation. I just know that I'm seeing a lot of parallels with the NHL. And of course, some of the things that have come out about US gymnastics, the FA, and some of the stuff that happened with sexual abuse of young youth players. Um, there's a lot of sports that I think I've got to have this day of reckoning. I just cover it under player welfare. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be injury, it could be mental health, it could be bullying, it could be family issues, like I need some time away, some compassionate leave, racism, homophobia, whatever the problem is. It's not just player welfare, it's also backroom staff welfare, just welfare of your employees. And when you've got a member of the cabinet in government going, and he's from an Asian background, saying, yeah, heads have got to go. When you're getting members of parliament involved, we haven't had a select. I think it is going to go before the Media and Culture and Sports Select Committee at some point, or it might have done. Yorkshire are in trouble, and the ECB has received money from the government as emergency loans during the COVID period. So the ECB are indebted to the UK government. And then with the ECB getting that money, they then distribute funds to the counties, to the domestic game. So the ECB has a stake in this. They need to pull their finger out because they've received emergency loans from the government in the last couple of years. And and Jeffrey Boycott is part of that culture because he's still an honorary ambassador for the club, I believe. He's one of the he is a very dated individual. But if you've still got people of his era involved in the day-to-day running of the team, behind the scenes, in the administration and in the public face of it, you can see why there's a culture issue because he has been known to, his views on women. He did a radio interview last year where he goes, I couldn't give a toss what they think. Like he's showing how out of touch he is, and he's been accused of domestic violence and admittedly in France, but he's cricket has a problem. I don't think Michael Vaughan necessarily was doing it maliciously, but I think there needs to be a culture change. But we've never heard any of these other allegations of misconduct or toxic atmospheres at other county cricket clubs in the top elite level or the lower levels where it's semi-professional and amateur in the county structure. Never heard of it. So that for me is an interesting one. There's clearly a win at all cost mentality, a toxic culture, and I say this: the win at all cost mentality is actually more damaging long term for an organisation than people realise. Look at Barcelona, for example. Again, that win at all costs. Look at Man United. Look at a Man City have got so many allegations against players of misconduct. It beggars belief. Hello, lots of sackings to talk about this week. 3 in one day. Now, I was expecting, in a month, for example, you might get 3 sackings. But yeah, I feel sorry for Nuno at Spurs. I think that's the one that's the most obviously glaring one. 4 months into the job. Schlopp at Barnsley, again, similar time in the job. Cox at Scunthorpe is a different case, but all of them are very similar in look at their win percentage, look at their what is expected of them as managers. Different levels of the pyramid. Barnsley have gone from playoff team on the verge of Premiership to second bottom by virtue of Derby being in administration. Had Derby not been in administration, they are rock bottom. Spurs, there's no direction at Spurs, let's be honest. They've completely mismanaged their direction since they announced they were rebuilding the stadium. They needed to win silverware first. They didn't invest in winning silverware first. They invested in infrastructure, which you would normally do after you've won a bit and you've built that success. So therefore, you've got bigger name players going to the club, better foundations. They did it arse over face, got into debt, signed up for the Super League, damaged their reputation, put non-playing staff on furlough, retracted that very quickly. Star player the whole thing at Spurs is a mess. Conte is going to have a really interesting time of things, and he's going to be a hard taskmaster. So when Nuno was saying that key players in the squad aren't putting effort in on the training ground, on the field, in video sessions, regardless of his style of play, if you've got it doesn't matter if it's sport or not. If you've got individuals in an organisation that you're coming in, you're the new manager, you're putting forward your proposals, and people aren't buying in or giving it a go to buy in. If they buy in and it still doesn't work, okay, that's a flawed system. But if you've got 4 months and they're not trying, then I'm sorry, that's on the playing group. Also, the managerial search, they went and asked Conte to join him in the summer, and the talks collapsed. So I don't know what's changed in that 4.5, 5 month period from, I don't want this club now. We're not got negotiations here. We're negotiating, but we're not going to reach a consensus to, I'll take the job. I don't know what's changed. I don't know if Levy and the board have given a little, which is highly unlikely because he doesn't like spending money. And Conte wanted just that one extra member of his backroom staff, which would cost 3 million in total on the managerial budget. And Levy was like, no. I don't know what's changed because Conte said he wanted to overhaul the youth setup, the scouting, the player development, and the general infrastructure of how you basically put the team on the field. And Levy was like, I'm not paying 3 million for that, but he was willing to pay 300 grand a week for Gareth Bale, which. So in about nearly 3 months, that's the same 3 million you've just spent on a player's wages. You couldn't make that one up. Newcastle still, as I say, in a search for a manager. I think Eddie Howe is probably going to be the one they get. It means they don't have to spend any money on a get-out clause. Same with Conte at Spurs. So it actually is cheaper to get him in. He's got a proven track record in coaching in the Premier League and longevity on smaller budgets. So he can definitely improve players. He did that with Bournemouth until COVID hit. And then I think they didn't quite adapt to the return to play with the disruption. I think that wobbled them a little bit. Had COVID not hit, I think he would have kept the Bournemouth job and kept them up. He has been touted as a future England manager. That's a lot of pressure to put on a manager, but he did. Bearing in mind he's only a few years older than some of the senior players, so I think he's more relatable to them, and all that. I mean, look, all the players that have been signed since Bale left the first time have all left the club. In the Spurs situation, as I say, regularly sacking the manager doesn't necessarily breed success. Chelsea notwithstanding, and it doesn't breed stability. I don't think Tottenham have a particular direction. I mean, what is their style of play? What's their philosophy? What is the club? because, in my opinion, they haven't taken that next step. I think the period between 2015 and 2019, so pre-COVID, they had a purple patch and they came up short. Premier League, they were neck and neck with Leicester, and then they blew it. And Leicester just managed to grind out that title. FA Cup semi-final a couple of years later against Man United. What winning position? First 25 minutes they were brilliant, and that was a really crap United side. Ended up losing the Champions League final, both League Cup finals. They've had opportunities to win silverware, and they've really hashed it. Really hashed it. Um, they just scrape into this Conference League in Europe by a point. They've not had a good start. Conte is going to be interesting how he deals with a divided dressing room. Is what I believe. I believe there is a divided dressing room there. Um, I don't think all players are happy with what they're paid. The wage negotiations, contract extensions. A lot of players have left who weren't bad players. I'm not saying these are all crap. They're playing at the top level. They are, top level professionals, far better than I ever could have dreamt of being when I was at school and at youth level. But there's clearly massive problems within that dressing room, massive problems. And the Gareth Bale loan move, I don't understand that at all, because this is a club saying we can't afford to pay our non-playing staff during COVID. We can't afford things. There's a reason why they signed up to the Super League fiasco. It's because of the stadium, and they couldn't. You know, I can say favourites to go. Well, Tottenham, I just don't know. They've really just they're very reactionary. Tottenham. Who's my favourite to win the league and who's favourite to go down? At the moment, I think Chelsea win the league. I think Liverpool, Man City, and West Ham have been a good surprise, a healthy surprise. That one is really interesting with the top four. How long West Ham can keep up their momentum, but I think David Moyes has found a renaissance. Favourite to go down, Norwich are done. They're done. If Newcastle can get a couple of wins together, that mixes it up. And I think Burnley, unless they can start get going, are in trouble. But Leeds aren't looking great either. But I think Norwich are definitely going down. And it's Newcastle, it's a question mark whether they can get a guy in. If Eddie Howe can get appointed as what is seeming likely as soon as possible, that young, energetic manager, that's definitely, and he's not a screamer, he's not a shouter, he's a very calm individual. He comes across very well spoken, he's very knowledgeable on the game. He has a lot of managerial experience in the Premier League, and working with constrained budgets, and he could be the guy to get them out of trouble. But they need to start getting some wins together because they risk at the moment getting cut adrift. They're already 3 points behind Burnley, and Burnley are having a poor start to the season. So, and Burnley are notorious for being slow starters, but they risk getting cut adrift. Norwich are done. They're done. The Conference League, I look, bring back the Cup Winners' Cup. Reformat the Champions League and Europa League to straight knockouts. Guess what? You've got rid of your fixture congestion, and you mean it makes cup competitions like the League Cup and FA Cup. Crowd numbers will go back up, and the big teams won't have to rest so many players because they'll be forced to, go. This is a gateway into Europe if we're having a bit of a struggle this season. So let's say, for example, who's having a poor season? Man United aren't having the best of seasons, are they, to start with, or Everton. They've got, we can get a chance into Europe. Our league form isn't so great, but on a one-off game we can win. Let's target the FA Cup. Let's target the League Cup, and that could be our gateway to Europe. That would be my opinion. I'm not a big fan of the Conference League thing. It's just like, what? Bearing in mind, all the European club football, apart from the finals, is now put behind a paywall because of BT Sport in this country. Cheers. And Ofcom and the BBC have a lot to answer for with that one. Because free-to-air terrestrial TV, there are some protections in place where they actually grade competitions like Tier 1, Tier 2, or Grade A, Grade B, Grade C, things like that. And there are concerns that, that's a monopoly. That's something that shouldn't be happening. When it was on ITV, Channel 5 and BBC, depending on the rights deal with what European competition it was, and Sky, brilliant format. You could, if you wanted to pay for Sky, you could. But if you didn't want to pay for Sky or couldn't afford to, like my family, at points, you could still catch a European game, be it was an English club team or even a non-English club team playing on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday on the telly. Good fun to watch. I loved watching the Cup Winners' Cup back in the day. It was my gateway into watching European football more than the Champions League and what became the Europa League. The UEFA Cup and the Challenge and the Champions League or Cup, European Cup back in the day when actually I was actually a baby when they changed the Champions League format. But I do think um, it would be nice to see. Um, but yeah, bring back the Cup Winners' Cup. That was a well loved competition, and I should do some history on the Cup Winners' Cup. Actually, have I been to West Ham Stadium? No, but I have been across London on the tube. It doesn't. If it depends where you're coming from. You're assuming coming from. So I think Chester, you live in Swindon. Just get the direct train to Paddington, get on the Underground, get on the Central Line or the Jubilee, and you end up at Stratford. And it's literally the Olympic Park is right by Stratford Tube Station. I don't know how long it takes to get from Swindon to Paddington. I know Reading to Paddington can, if it's a non-stop, 25 minutes, half hour. I've done it before. If you go, yeah, flat out non-stop, so that's Reading. So Swindon, I'd say give an hour to get to Paddington. Underground, you're going to be on the district. But no, you can be go straight to the Jubilee line at Paddington, I believe. I believe you can. I could be wrong. No, I think I'm wrong. Shit. You need to get basically on the Jubilee or Central line and then basically just go all the way to the end. And it's literally right by the tube station. It's right by the mainline station, Stratford. You can see it. Big urban development. I would say if you are a Swindon fan, you're playing West Ham in the FA Cup, for example, this season, hypothetically that could happen. I would say give 3 hours travel time. So I would say leave at about 8 and 9 in the morning. You just go across London on the tube. You get the direct train and you take the tube. You don't have to do any walking whatsoever, apart from when you get out of Stratford and you're literally there. For me, it would take me roughly similar. Bit of Didcot Parkway again. When I used to go to Lords, me and my stepdad used to get out, drive to Ealing Broadway, and then get the train into Paddington, then the Underground to on the Northern Line. We used to get out, and then we would walk about a 10-minute walk from I think it's King's Cross or Marylebone. I think it's Marylebone. Same with the Oval. You get out at Vauxhall and you walk. But yeah, if you're going from Didcot Parkway, look, if my ex-partner can get from Oxford to Crowthorne in 45 minutes via Reading, yeah, I would say that's about an hour into, depending on what service you get, into Paddington and then Underground. And the Underground's piece of piss. It's all colour coded. What you basically want, if you're going into Paddington, Waterloo actually ironically is better, slightly longer but better, just direct tube rather than getting several Underground trains, because they both have services going from Reading. But Reading to Waterloo takes an hour and 10 minutes direct, but then you're already on the Jubilee line. Wow, I'm giving a geography lesson and a transport lesson. Belongs on the other channel. Stop talking about trains. I know I'm a train nut, but please. And they're not chuffs, they're electrics. But yeah, it doesn't take long. But again, this is what the sports organisers don't realise is because some of these leagues and sports are global brands, and the Premier League's a global brand, and I've done an ice hockey away day with a friend, and I rode for 25 minutes on my motorbike from where I was living at the time to his flat in Maidenhead. We got the train. It was a 14-hour day just to go to Streatham, which is basically Brixton, on Brixton High Road in Southwark, for an ice hockey game a couple of years back. And I didn't get home until 1 in the morning. Paddington Stratford, yeah, less than that. Just the Jubilee line is quicker than the Central line. And it also depends on engineering works if you're going on a weekend. If it's engineering works and the Paddington line is shut, you're going to have to Waterloo, but Waterloo is actually better for underground connections. I'm going to have to find my underground map because I do actually have one, and it's really weird. But basically what I would suggest is Central line if you're going to Paddington, Jubilee line if you're go to Waterloo. They're just easier to get to. Central Line's the red one, Jubilee Line's the silver one. And when you get to Stratford, which is the end of, I think, both lines, I believe it is, you get out uh, you get out of the stadium. Basically, it's like Wembley Way. You literally, and it's like the old Highbury Tube Station. You're right by the stadium. Couldn't make this up. Um, so it's quite easy. I think I think less than an hour. If I can get from Waterloo to where was I going? Where was I going? In 20, I had a meeting in London at the beginning of 2019, and I had to get the train in. I had to get a couple of trains actually. Um, but yeah, I reckon you can do it. If I can get, yeah, I reckon you could do it. Paddington to Stratford in an hour. Best bet Central Line. So yeah, Paddington's not a bad bet. You just got to get a couple of tube changes. I'm gonna have to. I'm seriously. This is now bugging me because I'm now gonna have to find my tube map. I actually have an underground map. I used to go to London quite a lot. I haven't been since the pandemic, but I've been to London a lot. I've been to football at London, London cricket. I've done ice hockey. I've been to a lot of sport in London rugby. I've done major team sports. The only major team sport I haven't actually watched in London is rugby league. But the London Broncos play at Ealing Trail Finals. Best Premier League transfer this season. I'm waiting for January. I didn't pay a lot of attention to the transfer market. I really tuned out this summer, partly because I took a break from the channel and I took had some health issues, so I really just took a zone out and a recharge. Chelsea, their transfer policy is always a head scratcher for me. How do you fit Saul into that team? Um, but you know, there could be a question: is he fully fit? He didn't have the best Euros, so is he fully 100%? Um, does he suit Tuchel's current tactics? Because Tuchel's a very pragmatic manager at times. Um, it'll be interesting how he's played. You've got the FA Cup and the League Cup ties coming up. There's going to be the congested Christmas period. I reckon he does get used a bit when injuries start coming in. I think because he's been playing in La Liga, to get him up to Premier League speed, just some clubs have made the mistake of throwing in players who played in a different style of football straight into the Premier League, and it hasn't worked, and it's been a disaster. I think Tuchel's been a bit wise in using him. There could be some fitness issues. So yeah, Lee Valley. Lee Valley's interesting. I think there is a lot. They spent a lot of money in Stratford. It was a very deprived area of East London. Very deprived. I'm not even joking. Um, it was the same when they built the Millennium Dome in Greenwich, or what is now the O2. Again, at the time, 20 years ago, again, very deprived part of the former Docklands that was lagging behind with the rest of the docks in redevelopment, like Canary Wharf and stuff. So yeah, East London, north and south of the river, there's been a lot of deprivation, social stagnation, and people talk about the Olympic legacy and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a lot of the facilities are still used, um, and the stadium. I mean, West Ham fans were highly critical of the stadium, and the stadium isn't necessarily the best for football. I'm not saying it's a bad facility. It was great for the Olympics. They played rugby. I think they played rugby league and rugby union there. In both World Cups since 2012. So it's been they've done athletics. They've got it's a multi-use stadium. London has a lot of them. London has a lot of big stadiums that are multi-use. Um, I am surprised the NFL hasn't split the London series between Twickenham, Wembley, White Hart Lane, and the London City Stadium because they've got 4 games a year. They could have one in each location. That'd be brilliant. Um, yeah, London's got some big. Well, the thing is, they lease the stadium; they don't own it. So that's down to the who owns the stadium. Oh my God, they're leasing it. And the London Mayor's office has a big sort of stake in the stadium. It's not owned by West Ham. Um, um, uh, but because it's got the retractable seating for the athletics and other sports events where you can adjust the lower bowl. I'm not sure how much unless they come to an agreement with the owners because they lease the stadium, which is they've got a good deal. They've got one of the best deals for a stadium lease you could ever want. It's really in their favour, really is. And Sadiq Khan's come out and whinged about it, but it's Sadiq Khan, and he's a left wing twat. Um, he's a champagne socialist, and that's again something for the other channel. Which I'm going to do a live stream on there as well, but I'm watching the FA Cup later. In regards to the stadium, they want to expand. It's up to the owners of the stadium. That's the situation. So what Chelsea found when they wanted to do works at Stamford Bridge, they actually leased their stadium now. They got in bad financial difficulties when Ken Bates had the club, so they leased their own stadium. Talking about stadium ownership and arena ownership, so many teams don't own their stadiums, and they have to pay to play, basically, and they have to pay rental agreements. Look at the Rico in Coventry, for example, and the mess that was over the last 2 decades. Widnes Rugby League Club, Widnes Vikings, with the basically the council own the stadium there. Um, Clubs that generally don't lease their stadiums are generally more successful because they can, pump money into their clubs. Like Man United with Old Trafford, for example, they own that stadium. Reading with the Medeski, they own that stadium. And there's, I work, a lot of my work takes me by the Medeski nearly every day. Ironically, the Medeski, if you're travelling by car or by bus, it's very easy to get to. If you're travelling by train and then you have to get a bus, it's a pain in the ass, but they are building a new train station near the Medeski. The infrastructure is already they're planning that. So match day transport to the Medeski will get a lot easier. But the Medeski is actually conveniently located if you are an away fan, ironically. Very easy to get to if you're an away fan. Or if you are a fan who's got a home ticket who is travelling by their own motor vehicle and or by a park and ride system, it is actually ironically one of the better located stadiums to get to. Yes, stadium, either rebuilding stadiums or leasing stadiums can be a problem. And if the stadium or arena owners go, we don't want you as tenants anymore, you're homeless, pretty much. That's how it is. The Manchester Derby, yeah, I think that could be a draw. I really do. I generally think that could actually end up being a draw. That could be really interesting. A draw serves neither side because they lose ground on their rivals. The pressure on Solskjaer, well, that's a legacy of the Glazers, really. Whoever's followed Alex Ferguson has always had a noose around their neck anyway. The fans got too used to success and not used to having to go through tough times. And that's the mark of a true fan if you can stick by your team when they are really terrible. Yeah, again, that's to do with the Commonwealth Games, and that was to do with the previous ownership signing that agreement. Nothing to do with the current ownership at City, which is interesting. So when you've got like a massive international tournament, World Cups, Euros, whatever, there's generally a massive surge of infrastructure development, and who pays for that? So in the build up to the Rugby League World Cup in 2013, which we hosted, there really wasn't a lot of infrastructure development. But this current Rugby League World Cup that has been delayed, there has been a lot of investment in infrastructure. Rugby Union World Cup, several they didn't have enough Rugby Union stadiums that met the grade to be classed as international stadiums, so they used football stadiums. But ironically, if we were to host a major tournament, apart from the Rugby League World Cup, the infrastructure is already here. We've got so many top class venues that if it's football, meet UEFA and FIFA standard. If it's rugby union, meet World Rugby standard for an international stadium. If tier one, if it's rugby league, piece of piss. You just need an all-seater stadium that isn't falling apart because it's rugby league and most stadiums are falling apart. So if you are hosting a major team international event, we have the infrastructure. It's already here. In regards to City getting there, getting the what is now become the Etihad, which was the City of Manchester Stadium, the old Commonwealth Games Stadium. Again, very similar to West Ham with the Olympic venue, the Games legacy. Wouldn't surprise me if one of the West Midlands clubs ends up going to the Birmingham Alexander Stadium. Wouldn't surprise me. if let's say Birmingham City or Aston Villa wanted to redevelop or rebuild their stadiums, end up there West Brom. If they were like, oh, the Hawthorns, we need to rebuild it, they end up there for a temporary period because I believe that's going to be a multi-use stadium as well. I'm having a fag. I know I shouldn't. I run out of roll-ups. I bought some fucking straights. I hate smoking these. No, it's smoking less than a live stream. But yeah, stadium ownership and stadium redevelopment. Look, I'm an ice hockey fan. Ice hockey teams in this country have to lease and pay to play. That's why the finances aren't great, and that's why the stability of the sport in this country isn't great. I've got a massive fucking spider on the wall. You are going to die, you little fuck. Oh, I've got a false widow. Oh, fuck off, you're dead. Correction, I had a false widow. It's dead. I think stadiums. Bradford is interesting. To be fair, I do like the closeness to the pitch you are at Valley Parade, at Bradford City. Bearing in mind they had to basically rebuild that after it burnt down in the mid '80s, the Bradford City fire. Odsal, however, is an absolute shambles of a stadium because it used to be a speedway track as well, and it's in bad state of repair. Um, Bradford City, I don't mind Valley Parade. I like the closeness you are to the pitch, the intensity of the fan base there. I do really like that. Yes, you could say it's an older stadium and needs a fair bit of investment. Bradford City don't have the money. But I do believe they own Valley Parade. So that's a positive for Bradford City. They have real estate that they can leverage if they want to rebuild. It will cost them money. Um, it would be nice to see Bradford City back in the Premier League. That is an intense old stadium that I think away teams don't like playing at. When Bradford City are playing well, away teams do not like playing there. But the playing surface of Valley Parade cuts up. But Bradford as a city is poor man's Leeds. Leeds gets all the spotlight because they've got more professional teams that have played at the higher level and get more media spotlight, more investment. Whereas Bradford is the poor sibling to Leeds. It's poor man's Leeds. Odsal is a joke of a stadium though, and it's a shame what's happened to Bradford Bulls. And I could do a video on the Bradford Bulls struggles and the issues with Odsal, but I could be here all day. The video would be like an hour long. Will we see any new stadiums? I mean, look, we've got the Brentford Stadium, which is a beautiful rebuild. It's a beautiful facility in West London. Fulham are expanding Craven Cottage. I think the next stop is QPR to do Loftus Road up. Yeah, Leeds are in the spotlight for the wrong reasons, but that's to do with Yorkshire County Cricket Club, which is a wider organisation that encompasses the whole of Yorkshire, all three ridings of Yorkshire. But obviously, the County Cricket Club is based in Leeds. So yes, in that regard, they're in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. But Bradford going under the radar. There's a lack of investment in Bradford, but Bradford is a sports city. It's just a poorer relation of Leeds, and it's a city that needs investment in general. Bradford just needs investment in general. Legacy of deindustrialisation. Differences with Leicester, they own Leicester. The King Power is a beautiful facility, and the club is well run. Everton, Goodison Park, they could do what they did at Anfield with Liverpool and build on site. They're choosing to move well away from the traditional location to the docks, and the local pubs and cafes and restaurants and local businesses will suffer as a result of match day. Our job's tough to come by in English football. What we saw, I mean, what do you mean by jobs? Because this is interesting. Because everyone, when we talk about football, you talk about the players, you talk about the managers and the coaching staff. People forget that you've got a huge amount of infrastructure behind the scenes, all the way from the board level, all the way down to the shop stewards who work in the club shop and the tea lady who works at the training ground. When I say the tea lady, I mean the catering staff. It's more than just what you see on TV. And some of these fly on the wall documentaries where they follow sports teams around gives you an insight into the day-to-day runnings of a sports team. Because a lot of people forget that there is a massive support infrastructure from the training ground to the club shops to public relations officers, community outreach officers, HR department. They are massive businesses. Um, would I? I mean, I actually where I live now, Reading's training ground is only about 2.5, 3 miles away from where I live. I could walk to there in about an hour if I was having a little wander in the countryside. Yeah, I literally live like a stone's throw away from Reading's training ground. It's a lovely little facility. It's not the biggest facility, but it's a very nice modern facility in a place called Arborfield, which is going through a lot of redevelopment. It's an ex-army town, and the army base is gone. It's a small village basically. It's an ex. There used to be a massive army base there, which has now been closed down in recent years, and a massive, massive amount of redevelopment. There's film studios in Arborfield. There's the Reading training ground in Arborfield. Massive new housing developments. So they're basically redoing the entire community, and part of that redevelopment is Reading moved their training ground there, and it's a really nice facility. It's right by the main road. You can see it. It's small. It's not massive, but the car park is actually bigger than the building. There's a lot of support staff that work there. A lot of the Reading players live in the local area, which is really nice. And because Reading aren't in the Premier League at the moment, they go underneath the radar a little bit when it comes to like the media and the fans. If they were back in the Premier League, I think that'd be a different kettle of fish. Different kettle of fish. But when they were in the Premier League and they were flying high in the Championship, I did used to see a lot of Reading players around in the local communities in this area. A lot of them live in Berkshire, Hampshire, and Surrey. It's really nice. And a lot of them are down to earth as well, which is really good. I mean, low level workers, I suppose. How competitive? I've never really looked. I mean, it was a while back when I was younger that there were jobs going with London Irish was sharing the Medeski Stadium with Reading, and a friend of mine I went to school with actually played for London Irish at the time. Um, and there were jobs advertised on the internet and at labour exchanges, as you would call it in the US, or the job centre as we call it here. So yeah, jobs are advertised. With what's happened in the last 2 years, and we'll go the last 2 years because of COVID, because it was already being reported that this was happening in China this time 2 years ago. Um, um, there are jobs available. I don't know how hard it is to get in. I mean, if you want to work in the retail side of it, you've got club shops. So if you live in the local community to work at the club shop, which are open, they're open, all year round. To be honest, they never shut down. There's also hotels. Medeski has a hotel. Ewood Park has a hotel in Blackburn. A lot of football clubs will have hotels on site. When it's off season, they'll host weddings and birthday parties and corporate functions. So football clubs, in fact, all sports clubs have a second stream of income. I remember 2.5 years ago, I went to a motorcycle show at one of the Reading rugby clubs during their off season. They need other streams of income. And so other events are held. I mean, Ascot Racecourse hosts weddings, birthday parties, corporate functions, because there's only so many race meetings a year that Ascot Racecourse has. Fireworks nights, music festivals. So the Donington Racetrack has, Download Festival, which used to be Monsters of Rock back in the 80s and 90s. Reading Festival takes place near Caversham Lock on the fairground. So a lot of these sports arenas and indoor arenas will host events outside of their sporting season. We've seen boxing at Wembley. We've seen music concerts at Wembley. I wouldn't say a lot of people who work for football clubs don't care about football clubs. Generally, they do because that's their employer. They do actually care how the team does because when the team is successful, ironically, they get bonuses. A friend of mine used to work for BMW when BMW were in the F1. And when the BMW team got a podium or a points finish, I think they got a couple of wins while they were Williams BMW. They got a bonus for that month, and especially when they did well in the World Touring Cars, they got a bonus on the sports side of the company. So yeah, I do think they do care. Do they refurb the army houses? I've worked for the MOD. I've worked on the various councils I work for as a refuse collector, which is the technical term. All three of the councils I've worked for have had current and ex-military housing. Sometimes they refurb. I mean, that's how my sister got her old maisonette, which is a two-story flat in Borden. The army was still there, but they were selling off the land. They've now gone now. So sometimes, yes, if it's later army housing, they do refurb. Some of the old Arborfield army housing is still there. Lots of new housing as well. It depends on the level of housing. If it's the Barrack block housing, which is generally one bed flats, similar to what I've got now, it gets knocked down and converted. If it's the semi-detached NCO and officer housing, sometimes in Camberley where I used to work, a lot of that's been refurbed and repurposed. Sometimes they knock it down. So it depends on circumstance really when they're decommissioning and changing things. Um, but no, I do believe a lot of employees of football clubs do care about the sport, or just employees of the teams they work for do care. Especially in some of the lower level sports where it really is a part of the community. If it's a local community cricket club or football club or rugby club, ice hockey team, you have to care. You wouldn't want to work there if you didn't care. Plus, you get to watch this. You get paid to watch the sport. So yeah, you do have to care a little bit. Otherwise, it's just going to be a even worse atmosphere. Um, do I think 28 grand is a lot for a graduate wage job? Oh, that's a question for the other channel. Sorry about that. While it's an interesting question, that's a question for the other channel. I think I'm going to do a live stream on the other channel at some point over the weekend where I discuss the education system, the economy, the low wages that we have, the skill shortage we have. But that's a question for the other channel. It's an interesting question though. I mean, is if you're talking about you going into like sports administration or something like that, for a starting, if that's your first job straight out of education, fair play to you. My brother, I mean, he's working as an electrician. He's 19 today. It's his 19th birthday today. He's on a higher salary than me, and I'm nearly 13 years older than him. It's a month to my birthday. He's on more money than me, which is depressing. The best way to put it is depressing. Um, um, but my brother's on a better salary than me and has better job opportunities as a trade. Um, oh, it's just the history buffing. It's just the history buffing. You just drop the 89. It's just the history buffing. That's it. You Instead of sports, you've got history. Which league does the best job of? I remember you talking about wage. I can't remember. No, it was on the other channel. Other channel. It's the best. That's more of a whole encompassing of the social and political and economics. And while the other channel's smaller, I can definitely, if you guys were to come over to the other live stream, that'd be really interesting because then we could have a real in-depth little chat and bits and pieces. But 28 grand, if that's your starting job and you've never had a full-time job before, it's your first job out of education, that's pretty good. If you've had work before and you might have gone into being, doing an open university course, that's different. But it depends on what your salary expectations are and what industry you're going into. But that's a discussion for the other channel. Which league does the best job of team branding? I'm not sure on this one. European football sells itself because it's a global game. The North American leagues, the NFL is a license to print money. The NHL is going for this expansion, so with Seattle joining, and I think Seattle, they haven't got a mascot. um, so, but all told, certain sports sell themselves. Other sports are trying to grow. So there's ways of doing it. Social media helps. Positive headlines help as well. And I think social media helps with that because the mainstream media will miss a lot of things or not report a lot of things because it doesn't necessarily, you know, um, uh, some leagues struggle more than others. I think when it comes to branding, I mean, like the Major League Baseball, they are literally, I think, on the verge of a lockout player strike within the next couple of years at a push. Um, The NHL right now is obviously in damage limitation mode with what's happening with the Chicago Blackhawks organisation and related issues to do with that. Um, but allowing their players to go to the Olympics is a positive. The NBA, obviously, Michael Jordan and LeBron James and the Space Jam film franchise, that helps. Obviously, the NHL with the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim and the Mighty Ducks film helps. Um, when you have an underdog team that wins, so the Atlanta Braves in this case, because I don't think anyone would have predicted the Braves winning the World Series, but it's Major League Baseball. Um, Saracens obviously had their issues because of the salary cap scandal. I'm not. I think Harlequins. I think is the most you know interesting brand because of their kit. Basically, Harlequins kit is amazing. Absolutely insane. It's multicolored, amazing. Um, but I think the NFL is down to ownership of the teams. There are some teams in the NFL that are really woeful, but they're still exceptionally wealthy. It's because of their owners. The NFL is a license to print money. It really is. I think out of the four major leagues in the US, Major League Baseball is in the worst situation right now because it's not making the news in any way, shape, or form. Um, and it's still recovering from the steroid scandal that encompassed multiple teams and organisations and multiple superstar players. The NHL damage limitation mode when it comes to the Chicago Blackhawks scandal. The NFL, obviously, they've got this London series, and whether you think it's run its course, they several NFL owners own football clubs, which helps with that cross branding, so to speak. Um, yeah, the Dallas Cowboys. That's America's team, isn't it? It's. I have some Dallas Cowboys stuff somewhere. I do. I don't know where I put it, but Dallas is a massive sports market anyway. The Dallas Stars as well. Texas is a sports mad state, um, so that in itself helps. But if you're looking at a global branding, I think each league is unique and each team is unique. I don't think there's a perfect way to do it. But no news is bad news, but any news is good news, if that makes sense. So if there's eyeballs on your sport, good or bad, it gets attention. No, I'm keeping them. Keeping them. Keep my cheeks warm. They actually are keeping my cheeks warm. It's been really cold this week, and my face hasn't felt cold, so I'm keeping them for a while. I might on my birthday shave the whole lot off the hair and the burns, but at the moment it's staying. I I like being different. Um, I like being different. It works well with the crazy hair. I think if I wore like some of my older sports jerseys, it might be a bit more interesting. If I look like a '70s hockey player or a '70s football player, it might be a bit more interesting. Do I think Newcastle will stay up? Will they sign players in January? They need to get a manager first. Not getting a manager in is the bigger problem. They need to get a manager in. It's been a couple of weeks now. Nah, not good. A good friend of mine, my mate Sam, so I look like Neeskins, Johan Neeskins from the '70s, a Dutch player. Um, and that's sort of the look I was going for. But yes, George Best did have the sideburns. He did. I have a joke with my friends to do with the muttons. That also goes with the hair as well. I've had my hair long before, and I tend to say I'm going for the Dutch 1970s look. I don't think he. I don't think Eddie Howe is an underwhelming appointment. I think he's possibly the right guy for the job. I don't think he's underwhelming. I just think the length of time it's taken and going after Unai Emery in such a ham-fisted way shows how inexperienced this ownership group is with in regards to football. Um, what they need to do is get whoever in. Literally, they were planning to get an appointment done by Thursday. It's now Saturday. Game days today. They need to get an appointment as soon as possible. They need to get that fresh voice in the dressing room. I think Eddie Howe is the guy to do it. Look what he did with Bournemouth. He was there for a long period of time. He can bring stability. Um, in regards to, I don't think he's underwhelming. I think he possibly could be the right guy because he's worked with smaller budgets. He's worked with so-called lesser quality players and turned them championship players into Premier League players. And if you look at Newcastle squad, it's a championship squad. Um, I wouldn't call me the king of sports, but I did watch Fergo and the Freaks podcast, the latest episode where they're going through the comment section, and I might have placed a comment on the comment section going, "Jesus Christ, I've got 5 years worth of comments to go through. I dread to do it. That's why I've never done it." Um, in in my thoughts in regards to a lot of things, I started off with talking about the Yorkshire County Cricket Club scandal and the parallels with the NHL and the Chicago Blackhawks and several other sports. Any good sport podcast you recommend? The Matty Johns podcast. It's quite good. That's a good one. Bloke in a bar. If you like rugby league, it it's not the best. I'm not gonna lie. Fergo and the Freak. I've just started getting into that. Um, I've got more subscribers and viewers than them. So I spitting chicklets. Yes, I do definitely. That's a good one. That's a good one. It's one of the better ones. The the full podcast version on what's the hockey guy has a sports podcast on Podbean. He's a fellow YouTuber who I keep in contact with. There's a good one. Ferg on the Freak. Yes and no. They're doing it from a Sydney perspective, and I don't necessarily agree with everything they say, and I don't think they fully. There's a lot of tongue in cheek in that one. Um, you've got to get their humour. You have to not be easily offended. I think to watch that one. Same with Bloke in a Bar because I'm not overly keen on Bloke in a Bar. There's some of it I'm just a little bit. Yeah, you're condoning bad behaviour. I wouldn't say they're anti English, anti British. I think it's the tongue in cheek humour. I think they do point out a lot of the issues with British Rugby League. That is a fact, and I will agree with them on that. I think the Super League is shit. Uh, I do. I think the Super League and the RFL are a joke. The TV deal was a joke. There's a reason why, if you look at the history of the World Club Challenge, and you look at the history of the World Cup, and you look at the quality level of the NRL, and you look at the quality level of the Super League, there's no comparison. No comparison. Um, but I think a lot of it's tongue in cheek. I don't think they're going to go out there actually legitimately and go, anti-English because if it wasn't for Great Britain, they don't have a country. um, they are from Sydney. One is a West Tigers fan, one's a Penrith fan. I think with a lot of Australian rugby league podcasts, and there's some AFL ones as well, they don't condone enough of the bad behaviour of players. They will mention it, but they don't really go enough's enough. And I think that's what's damaging the NRL and the Super League to a certain extent. That the image of rugby league is the players constantly misbehaving every off season, and I'm waiting for the next player to fuck up. Um, I would say watch the NRL. It's better than Super League. The NRL website, NRL.com, you can get a subscription. I don't know how much it is in US dollars. The pre-season starts in February. The season starts in March. So you've got 5 months. I will be doing some previews of next season, but I think I'm going to do an NRL state of the game as things currently stand. Um, Australians are still butthurt they're defendants of British convicts. Only in a couple of the states. Not all of the states and territories were penal colonies. Not all of them. Tasmania and New South Wales were. Places like Perth, and Melbourne, and Adelaide weren't. They were free settlers. So it depends where you are in Australia and how butthurt they are. But I love Aussies. I love Aussies. But you've got to take their humour with a bit more tongue in cheek and a little bit different. You've got to take their culture as a bit different as well. In regards to their views on the Super League and the RFL, they're right. They come from a different angle, but basically they are like heavily critical of the state of the game in Europe. They are right. There is no comparison on that. I left a comment in regards to the debate over a a draft system in the NRL. It could work in regards to the fact that the salary cap is set up to work with the draft system. A rival league uses a draft system very effectively, but got the clubs on side. And I think with the amount of money that's been invested by teams in their youth setup and their catchment areas, it doesn't work. Um, there would need to be massive fundamental reform of youth and regional rugby league in Australia for a draft system to work. Um, no, a lot of Australians actually have other European heritage. It's just I think it's more human now at this point. Um, I think, yeah, it, I think it's an overblown issue, that one. But I feel like the Freak are very, very interesting because I've only just got into their podcast. I think the Matty Johns podcast is the best Aussie sports podcast there is. Um, in my opinion. In regards to sports podcasts in general, that demographic's changing in Australia. I've got a lot of Australian viewers. That demographic is changing. Melbourne is mostly from Korea. No, it's not. It's actually a lot of Italians and Croatians and former Yugoslavs live in Melbourne. The Chinese Korean heritage is a lot more spread out than you realise. But yes, there is a lot of Chinese heritage. Ironically, there's a lot of big Chinese link in Queensland historically, but that again is a conversation for the other channel. And there is a channel I do suggest you watch if you are interested in history, Aquachigger. If you watch River Hunters on the History Channel, the Chig, Aquachigger. If you are interested in Australian history, he went to Australia 2 years ago for a couple of months. He was invited over to Queensland and he did a lot of metal detecting history videos over there. And yeah, the Chinese links with Queensland are very, very interesting. Yes, you've got American Samoa, like you've got what is Western Samoa. So Samoa is Western Samoa and American Samoa. A lot of NFL and rugby league and rugby union players that play in the US have Samoan heritage. There is a big Samoan community on the Pacific coast, and a lot of big Samoan community in Hawaii as well. And there's a fair few Samoans who play in the NFL. Really? You've never seen an American or an Australian Orient? There's loads. There are loads. There's a big, big Chinese Korean community across Australia. There's a big one in Melbourne. There's a big one in Sydney. There's a fair sizable one in Brisbane as well. Um, very, very sizable. It's not in the same way like we have Chinatown and a big Japanese community in London. Um, the major urban areas do. There's a big Chinese community in Darwin as well. They do play some sports. They're mostly involved in sports administration and commentary and in business. Is again when people say to me, "Oh, we should," why aren't we having more Afro Caribbean or Asian players playing rugby union and rugby league? It's because they're not interested in it. The interest is a social economic one. It's a personal interest. We can't force people to participate in things they're not interested in. Um, I had a subcontinental Asian going, well, why are there no Asian players playing football? It's because you want to play cricket. We can't force your community to play something they're not interested in. They may be interested as fans, they just have no interest as players. They rather play cricket and field hockey. And fair play to them, because culturally, back in India, back in Pakistan, that's what you do. Um, it's the big sports over there. So when they come over here as third, second generation, well, yeah, I mean, Coventry's an interesting. I mean, now we're getting onto topics that would appear in the other channel, and things like that. But it is interesting to break down the demographics. So when we look at cricket, there's more Asian subcontinental heritage players who are second, third generation Indians, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans, Bangladeshis playing cricket, who are very, very good. Rugby union, rugby league, you do get Afro Caribbean and African heritage players, big black or white, who are second or third generation playing rugby union and rugby league, but not as many Asians. Football, different kettle of fish. Um, it is what it is. What's the most popular sport in Korea? I don't know on this one. Korea's an interesting one. Japan, they like baseball as a secondary sport. They like all sport. The Japanese are mad. Rugby and football are big in Japan as well. Korea, I don't know. I've never looked at Korea as a sports hotspot. Um, Taekwondo is obviously it's a Korean martial art. Um, they do play football over in Korea. They play table. They do play table tennis and badminton. They do, which are Olympic sports. But I've never really looked at Korea as a massive sports hotspot. But Koreans, obviously, they go to the World Cup in football. They do play rugby union in Korea. They have got an international side. They're not very good, but they have one. They do have an ice hockey league. It's not very good, but I don't really know. I don't really see the Koreans as the most sporty nation in the sense of not being unfit and unhealthy, but international wise, I think their football team is their best export. They always qualify for the World Cup, whether they do well or not, it's another thing. Um, but I've never really, yeah. No, baseball's Japan. I don't, I'm not sure in Korea. They might. I think they do have a very strong baseball following. Um, but I don't really know. The K League is quite an established Asian football league um, with a fair bit of history to it. But I've never really looked at the sporting breakdown of Korea. I mean, they've hosted the Olympics in Seoul and they've hosted the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. So they've had Olympic Games in both winter and summer events. What the fuck is that? Oh my. Okay, we have got some rather interesting bug, which is now very dead. Yeah, very dead. Very dead. You can fuck off. I've really got to clean up behind this whiteboard. That is grim. That is grim. Sorry about that. How much do you think the Man City NFL career? I don't really follow a lot of the indiscretions of players in the NFL. Um, and that's not me being harsh. There's so many player indiscretions in the off season and in the regular season in the NFL. There was a drink driving incident the other day where an NFL player has been arrested by causing death by drink driving. I've looked into a lot of the NFL scandals. I think I did a video in 2018 when I went through the NFL scandals at the time, and the list is endless. As I say, I don't really go into, I don't really follow the NFL anymore, and when you have so many player indiscretions and the amount of misbehaviour, and it's become like an everyday thing. The shock isn't there anymore. Like fans have become like almost complacent to it. Like it's everyday part of the culture of the sport. Um, the biggest rugby scandal, I think, I'll get to that in a minute. The biggest rugby scandal because I have my views on that. And I think it's the Bath cocaine scandal. I think is the biggest one, where a whole team was basically coked off their tits. And Matt Stevens was the fall guy, which I think is unfair because I think a lot more players should have been suspended and banned and head should have rolled, but it wasn't. It wasn't. Yeah. Who do I see winning? Man City, Man United. I think is going to be a draw. Um, there is a North Korea. I forget who the North Korea. I mean, well, there was Gaddafi's son played for Siena in Serie A at one point. So that's interesting. Um, biggest rugby scandal I think was the Bath cocaine scandal about 10, 15 years ago. Matt Stevens was in and around the England squad at the time, and he got a 2-year ban. And yeah, like in my opinion, I think that for me was the biggest scandal that I can think of. There's been individual player indiscretions, like Jared Beale and Matt and Cipriani with some of their drinking antics. The 2011 England World Cup debacle with some of their drinking antics. But I do believe the biggest scandal culture-wise um, uh, for me was the Bath cocaine scandal. Hughes van der Westhuizen was post-retirement when it all came out that he was cheating on his wife and was coked off his tits. But no, active players, I think that was the biggest scandal. There's been individual players done for steroids, both league and union. But if we're talking about rugby union scandal, that's going to be the big one for me. More heads should have rolled over that. It did highlight a massive culture issue within that organisation and within the sport. Um, Matt Stevens was the fall guy, but other players' heads should have rolled. I think that for me, that's the biggest one at professional level. I know at semi-pro and amateur level, there's a massive issue with steroid misuse and drug misuse in Welsh Rugby Union. Um, I watched I mean, there was a documentary on that. Oh god, about 5, 6 years ago now. Um, oh no, the biggest cricket one. There's loads of cricket scandal. I think the Hansi Cronje match fixing scandal was far more damaging than the ball tampering. Far more damaging. Um, Sri Sant going to prison for match fixing. But again, because now it's become so commonplace, like the Pakistan, spot fix scandal of 2011, 3 players went, well, 2 players went to prison, one got a suspended sentence. Um, yeah, no, for me, the cricket one, that's more of a culture scandal about win at all costs and a toxic culture within dressing rooms. Um, and I think the match fixing, spot fixing side of it, cricket is very exposed to corruption, and that in itself is a scandal. And I think the ICC are asleep at the wheel. I've discussed on the channel before my thoughts on match fixing in cricket, and I should do a video on the Hansi Cronje match fixing scandal, really, because that was, I think, the moment cricket woke up to the fact that it it was exposed to that kind of corruption. But as I say, I think that was the biggest scandal for me in cricket. The ball tampering, I think, highlighted a culture issue within the Australian setup and the win at all costs mentality, and the and it was cheating. Let's be honest, but it wasn't on the same level as Hansi Cronje, Sri Sant, other individual players, and suspicions over match fixing. Not even close. Although match fixing, you could say, "Oh, there's going to be a ball change on at this over because of this reason." Um, but cricket is the Hansi Cronje scandal. I think was a massive wake up call for cricket. It's never fully accepted. And when I, was young, that was the first big thing in the sport that I remember. That was negative. Um, I knew about the rebel tours to South Africa when South Africa still had apartheid, and there was that South Africa in the wilderness. But Hansi Cronje and that scandal really damaged the sport. I think more than people realise, and it's still having a massive impact on the sport today. Still having an impact today. Um, but yeah, no, I think talking about scandals, I think the Saracen salary cap scandal, we knew something was going on for about 3, 4 years before they got punished. Um, But the Bath cocaine scandal, I think, is far bigger for the sport, but ironically had less implications long term, which I find ridiculous. Um, because now we do know that in both league and union, players keep getting caught abusing recreational drugs. And whether you could argue that drug legalisation and decriminalisation, again, a topic for the other channel, and I argue in favour of legalisation and regulation. Um, you know, that's a discussion again for the other channel because it's a wider social and economic and political issue. It is, but again, like you're asking, these are some really interesting questions. Really interesting questions. God, I've got to stop smoking, but I'm so stressed right now. Work is so not fun at the moment. So not fun. But no, it's an interesting one. I I I think sports scandals in general, what we're seeing with Yorkshire County Cricket Club and the NHL with the Chicago Blackhawks, which is basically look at 2010 that season. several incidents, not just what happened with Carl Beach, but also Akima Lou as well. There was a very toxic, negative culture at that team, and the NHLPA and the NHL failed catastrophically. Um, I might just do a stream straight after this because the FA Cup. I mean, the horse racing doesn't start till 1, and the FA Cup doesn't start till like 4:30, 5 o'clock. So right now, I have like all day to kill. I might sort myself out a quick break in between live streams and get a bite to eat. But yeah, I'm gonna go on the other channel because the stuff that I want to talk on the other channel is more wide ranging, and some of the questions that have been brought up, like starting salary, scandals, corruption, they link in really well with the other channel. Thoughts on the Sens making Brady Kachuk captain? Young team, first round draft pick. He's got a bigger upside than his brother. They're very similar to their dad, Keith. He was a team alternate captain, I believe. There is a lack of it. I wouldn't say there's a lack of leadership at the Senators. There's a lack of experience at the Senators, and you don't want to make a goaltender captain, Greg Anderson. So I think they're saying that you're our franchise player. We're going to build the team around you, and he was their best player the last couple of seasons. We're building around you. Whereas his brother Matt doesn't have to be the franchise player. He's still a star player. Doesn't have to be. I think it's a fair move. The Sens are trending in the right direction now. They're going the right way. Ownership and the arena issue. We could argue that till we die a death. But yeah, I like it. I like it. It shows that they saying that we want you here long term, and we want to build around you and your young core, which is a positive sign in regards to them. Yeah, I say you want Shabbat as your assistant captain and Brady as your captain, but it's a young team. It's a young team, and they've got Matt Murray in goal. He's not having a good time of it. A lot of goaltenders are up and down at the moment, not having a good time of it. But it's a young team, and I think that's Pierre Dorian. We're building around you. Whoever the coach is, we're building around you. This core. So he's young. I think he's going to be there a long time. He's the next Eric Carlson. He's the next Alfredson. He's going to be there a long time. He might spend the majority. Well, but it's the salary cap era now, and we know how. Yes, I find it interesting when I post women's sport. I actually lose subscribers, but I get more views. It's really weird. I lost 2 subscribers after posting a video, but I got more views. It's bizarre. It's not the Women's World Cup when England play Cameroon in the Women's World Cup football. I think it's the 3rd or 4th most popular video on this channel. It's got like the 3rd most likes. I just don't get it. And people criticize. I always say when I'm doing a women's sports review video, women do not compare it to the men's. It's a different, treat it as a different sport. You know it's going to be lower. I was watching the USA Canada game last night. I noticed one thing: their tackle technique is better. They have a far better rugby tackle technique than the men. They actually tackle properly. It's what I found really interesting. I think I'm going to mention this tomorrow when after I watch the game. Is the women's tackle technique is a lot better. There was only 2 high tackles in the entire game. Far better. One was a yellow, and there was mitigating circumstances, but it was the player's second yellow, so it was an automatic red. Well, it became a red. And the other one was just a penalty because she slipped up. Other than that, their tackle technique is actually really, really good. They are being coached and trained, and the scrummaging technique's better as well. There's less boring in, there's less scrum collapses, and there's less resets at the scrum. Their scrummaging technique and their tackle technique is like what it was in 2003, 2004 for the men's game. Yes, they're 15 years behind, but their techniques were far better. How rugby union should be played. The breakdown was more competitive and fun. It was a proper breakdown. The women's game is like what the men's game was and should be now. The men's game, you could argue, is too professional, and the body types have all changed. So a prop is basically built like a centre, and a fullback's built like a, they're all basically one body type now, apart from second rows and maybe number 8s. But the women's game The Canadian goal kicker was their number 8. The women's game has been played like the men's game was 15, 20 years ago, and it's a far more enjoyable watch because the breakdown really is a breakdown. It's less messy as well, and when the ball does get unplayable, the referees are like, "It's unplayable." Yeah, quicker on the being unplayable. Um, I, I think that's my opinion on it. I think the women's game, they're playing it in the right way. I'm not so keen on some of the rule variations that are similar. They're trying to copy rugby league with a 50-22 and goal line dropouts rather than a 5 meter scrum. Um, I think that's rugby union being reactionary to what rugby league's been doing in the Super League and the NRL. I'm not sold on that. It actually encourages even more kicking than less, and we want to reduce kicking in the game. My favourite part, I get to interact with you guys more. I sometimes when I'm doing a video, I try and keep it as short as possible because I don't. I think the longest video I've done, which isn't streaming, is about like is some of my like tournament previews and stuff, and they can go on for like 20 minutes. And to do them and the amount of takes it takes, and when I screw up, it's really frustrating. So I try and keep my videos as short as possible because to prep a longer video is really time consuming, and I have a full time job, so I'm working 5 days a week. I was working 6 days a week in my previous job, so to get the time to do that is exhausting. It really is. So when I do these live streams, I can talk about the stuff in a bit more depth, and you can throw questions at me that I'm not expecting, which put me on my toes, keep me on my toes, and I can interact with you guys. So, and I'm noticing a lot of the same people keep coming back, and it's a good way to build the community and work out what you guys like and don't like. And you also you can pop ideas in for future videos, and that in itself is fun. Who would you say is the best teams in the world? Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, PSG, Bayern Munich, or Ajax? Ajax have the history, but they play in a less competitive league. Bayern Munich, I think their golden era of the last decade or so is starting to slow down. PSG, they bought their success, and they can't win in the Champions League. So Man City again, they without the money, they're not the team they are. Um, Chelsea and Liverpool. I mean, Chelsea had some reasonable success in the years before Abramovich came along in the FA Cup and things like that, but they had money issues for a long time. Liverpool, admittedly, they didn't win the league for a long time, but historically, they have been very consistent in winning trophies in every decade that they've played, pretty much since the 50s. So for the last 60, 70 years, Liverpool have been very, very consistent. In every decade, they win a piece of silverware. They just constantly grind away. Great youth system. Bayern Munich only started getting successful in the 70s. Ajax have been consistent throughout, but the Dutch league is less competitive now than what it was 10, 15 years ago. So that tempers it a little bit. PSG, the French league is not very competitive. It hasn't been competitive for a long time. And there are issues with the French league. The TV deal doesn't help. But again, you're missing out like a lot of the Italian teams and the history in the Italian league. I like looking at some of the other leagues that are less well known and less thought of as interesting, like the history of teams in some of the, I wouldn't say minor leagues, but lesser European leagues that aren't in the top 5, top 6. The Portuguese league is really interesting. Like Boa Vista have a great history, just not as much success as they should have had. It's weird that. And then you've got teams like Braga who are classed as upstarts because only in the last 15, 20 years have they started to get success. Where it's Benfica and Sporting and Porto. And Boa Vista is the big 4 in Portugal, but Braga is the upstart. So that's interesting. But oh yeah, look, when we're talking about now, Liverpool have won more FA Cups. It's just Chelsea in the modern era have won more FA Cups under the Abramovich era. Liverpool have won more league titles if we're talking including the Premier League era. The Premier League era is 1992 to today. Liverpool have won one. Absolutely. Premier League is yes, but in total titles, Chelsea are not even close. Not even close. Liverpool are the most successful English team of all time. Um, I don't think Chelsea have more fans. I don't think that. Where I live in the southeast of England, yes, there's a lot of Chelsea jerseys. There's a lot of Liverpool, Man United fans down here as well, which is very frustrating because obviously they're from up north. But it's how they were so successful in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s between the two of them, and their head-to-head battle for the most titles, league and otherwise. Um, Liverpool do have more trophies than Chelsea. Chelsea in the Premier League era, in the second half of the Premier League era, absolutely the most consistent, successful team. First half of the Premier League era, they were basically bankrupt. They were in a real financial mess until Abramovich came along, and they still managed to win a couple of trophies in there, but they weren't financially doing very well. They nearly lost Stamford Bridge. Um, they had a great side in the 90s, full of star players, but they were basically what I would class the French foreign legion. Um, it'll be an interesting one. Global branding. It's all to do with global branding, and the Premier League is the most watched football league in the world. Or soccer league if you're North American Australian. It's the most watched league there is. So there's more media spotlight, bigger international TV rights, the North American market, the Asian market, really obviously buy into that. Um, would I say globally, Man United's still the biggest global brand in English football, bar none. Because of the early years of the Premier League and the onset of satellite TV and broadcasting around the world, Man United won that battle. Absolutely. You look anywhere in the third world, the developing world, you will always see a Man United and a Barcelona jersey in there, and you will see. I mean, crikey, when like you've got like um you know, it- and with the amount of overseas owners as well, yeah. I think Chelsea, I don't necessarily have as much international support as you think. But they are a growing brand. Absolutely. The brand is growing. I don't think it's on the same size as Man United and Liverpool just yet, or Barcelona just yet. But look at the Barcelona case, the amount of debt they've got. That's really stunned the football world, how badly run they have actually been for a very long period of time. The signs were there a long time ago that Barcelona was in trouble, but the little warning signs were drip fed in. Um, and COVID exposed the issues that Barcelona has. But when you got the Champions League being broadcast globally and the big European leagues being broadcast globally, the Premier League is more sellable because it's more competitive and more teams are fighting for top spot and fighting for the FA Cup, fighting for the League Cup. That's where the French league just completely falls apart. Now, the fact you've got Messi playing there, you've got Mbappe playing there, and they're at PSG, does that increase attention? Yeah, it will. Does it increase the competitiveness of the league? We shall see. But Lille winning last season was, I think, the jolt that French football needed massively. But when the best French players aren't playing in France, that tells you everything you need to know about the state of the French league. That's my answer on that one. Not enough French players playing for the national side play in France. In fact, I don't think any of them do. I think there's a handful that might play at like Marseille and Monaco and PSG and Lille, but that generally get in the reckoning for squad selection. But that's not a good sign. Women's football is different. Women's football is different. A lot of the French players do play in France, but men's football, it's it highlights the issues the league has massively. Um, massively highlights it. How much has Messi made to go PSG in terms of the international market and boosting the French league? It boosts. Well, PSG, like when they had all the money, there was beIN Sports is a big international broadcaster. They basically own PSG. Well, their owner is also the owner of beIN Sports. There's a lot of conflicts of interest there. Um, trust me. PSG though, they're a merger of clubs that fell apart financially. They've been in the second tier of French football, which, by the way, is not good quality football at times in their history, and they're not the biggest club in France. So, for fan base, They don't have a lot of history pre 1970. So, in my opinion, they are the ultimate plastic club. Um, ultimate plastic club. If you break down the history of PSG and how they were formed and their period of no success until recently. Um, Whereas clubs like Lyon, Marseille, Montpellier, St Etienne, Toulouse, Bordeaux, Lille, Auxerre, AS Nancy. Um, I can name a lot of French clubs that have been established in their locations longer, that have got great histories of their own, um, domestically and in Europe, and the French league is nowhere near as competitive as it should be. It's simple, simple. It's plain and simple. Um, you take away PSG's money, they win nothing. And the other clubs in the French top flight are saying we need to constrain spending, live within our means, balance the books. And PSG are like, no, we're not going to do that. But the rest of the French league are like, we don't have the money to compete. So the French league automatically, apart from Lille notwithstanding, I think Bordeaux were the other club to win in that period of dominance, and Marseille. Um, they're like, even Monaco, which is like the second richest club in French football, because they've got a wealthy Russian oligarch owner. Like, yeah, no, we're not going to be on the same financial playing field. It's financial doping. It's basically like what you see at the Olympics when athletes are like doped off their tits on steroids and blood doping and performance enhancers. It is the equivalent in football. It's financially doping. They can pay the obscene salaries and the obscene transfer fees, the Neymar transfer, and there's like no recourse for the rest of the league to go, hang on a second, we're not even playing on the same playing field here. This is where I do think a salary cap and a transfer cap comes into play at some point, because the unhealthy nature of, well, we've got to spend to catch up. Look at Barcelona. They've bankrupted themselves. And they are one of the biggest clubs in the world, if not the biggest global brand in global football in the last decade. They are bankrupt. Absolutely fucked. Is the nice way of putting it. Absolutely. And you look at the Super League teams, 12 that signed up, only Chelsea were in a profit leading into that. Liverpool didn't disclose, and the other 10 had racked up various debts from a double figures millions. So like, I think Atletico were like 50 million or something in debt. And they were the first Spanish club to go, you know what, hang on, we don't really need this European Super League because we can play our way out of this, and we can get our way out of the situation by being a bit prudent in our transfer dealings and a bit prudent in how we manage our salaries. And the top three were Tottenham, Barcelona, and Real Madrid, and I think Man United took a hammering as well, financially. And they used to be very profitable. They still are, but it's just that last little period without fans filling that massive stadium at Old Trafford. It shows how important fans' gate receipts are to football. When we were told, "Oh, the TV deal, we don't really need fans. We can charge you nothing." They really do actually need us. They need gate receipts a lot more than they need a TV deal. Quite frankly, the gate receipts keep money coming on a weekly basis. The TV deal is on a yearly basis, then broken down into subdivided into success and league finishing position. But they actually need us to turn up week in, week out. They really do. And Barcelona, look at the state they're in. Jesus Christ! Imagine, just imagine if like Spain goes into another lockdown, but the football's allowed to continue with no fans in the new camp. Jesus Christ, the losses they'll be making. And they are in massive trouble. They can't spend their way out of trouble. They've got to sell their way out of trouble. They've got to try and sell this toxic product to a global customer base. And they're basically going to have to sell so many players, but no one's going to be willing to pay the get out clauses for their stupid contracts, because the players are overly entitled, because they've got so used to being overpaid massively. And player wages. I mean, this is why I prefer watching ice hockey and rugby league and rugby union. The players aren't paid massive bucks. People go, oh, but look, such and such a player's on this mega contract. Yeah, that's one player. That's why the average gets skewed. If you're looking at the NHL, the average salary, I think the league minimum is, I think, $700,000 US. and the average salary is about 2.6. I think 1.6 to 2.6 million is your average salary. That is skewed because of the top end talent like Conor McDavid, like um, who else is on a massive salary? Carey Price at the Canadians, Eric Carlson at the San Jose Sharks. They skew the average salary because they're the top end talent. The NFL is the same. The average salary is nowhere near as high as what people realise. It's the Tom Brady's that really massively skew the average salary. The average salary is a hell of a lot less. The league minimum is a hell of a lot less. NBA, you can have these mega buck LeBron James style salaries because the squad sizes are about like just into double figures, like 10, 12 players on a squad. Major League Baseball, there's no salary cap, so it's the rich teams can afford to like throw money around, and the poorer teams are like, oh, we can have you for 2, 3 years, and then we're going to have to trade you or let you go because we can't afford to pay your wage increase. And that's why I think Major League Baseball is going to be at breaking point. Where there's a breakdown between the owners and the players and the league and the players association, because they rely on a luxury tax system. Um, but yeah, average salaries are skewed. I mean, I don't know what the average salary is in the Premier League now, but the top end talent, because there's no salary cap, and if a club is profitable, it's within its means of 135% of losses or something like that. So you to reach financial fair play. If you're making a massive profit year on year, so let's say Chelsea, who are making a profit before the European Super League idea, they can make it rain, make it rain. Um, Newcastle United, they've got well. I mean, they will sell out that stadium week in, week out, regardless of who's owning the club. So ticket gate receipts are going to be through the roof. They're in the media spotlight because they've got the new owners. Whoever gets signed in January, merchandise sales. If they start winning games and they do well in the FA Cup, for example, and they win some silverware, going to make the club more valuable. The club has over halved in value since Mike Ashley's owned it. At its peak, it was worth. Yeah, I do believe that. Have I seen a sport that has jumped in talent level over the last 20 years? Women's sport, yes, the quality is improving across the board. That's a difficult one. That's a difficult one. I think the NRL as a league in Australia, the talent's improved. Rugby union, I think we've reached the plateau at this point in the men's game. The women's game I watched last night, the USA Canada second test. As I said, the tackle technique and the scrummaging and the ruck and maul was brilliant. And I know rugby union is not as big; it's growing in America. But if you're new to rugby union, watch the Rugby Union World Cup in 2003, and you will see what I would believe would be the best way to play the game. In the last 18 years, I think with professionalism, I think rugby union peaked on the men's game around 2007. I think we've been plateauing and then sort of like meandering for the last decade or so, in my personal opinion. Everyone's opinion is different. I don't know. It's a whole. I think a lot of sports have peaked. I think a lot of sports need to definitely look at themselves and go, how much further can we take this? Because with the onset of further professionalism, bigger wages, I think salaries have a massive part to play in this. I think the love of the game has gone out. A lot of players are now like, "Oh, this is just a day job now. I'm earning big money, and I can be a bench warmer and earn like 10 million a year. Ridiculous. Some of the salaries some of these players are on, but not doing a lot. I think the lower levels of sport have definitely come on because you know guys and girls playing it. I've also that are playing for the love of the game, not for the money. They're playing to get that big time contract, even if it's a short term contract, like they only the top level for a couple of years. You, I think British ice hockey has gone on leaps and bounds since I've been watching it, and there's been some ups and downs in that process as well. The game's gone up and down, but is now on the upward swing. I I think women's rugby union and women's rugby league has taken big steps, and women's football, soccer. There's obviously that debate about, from some cave dwelling knuckle draggers about it. I do always say people stop comparing it to the men's equivalent. It's a treat it as you would treat the non-league game, and just enjoy the fact that, hey, they're still better than you, and they're going to batter you if you were to play them on a fucking Sunday league game. Um, I I don't know. I think that's a very interesting one. I think ice hockey is one of those sports that has definitely improved across the board and is growing. But I think I think I'd have to talk about individual leagues. So the growth of rugby union and rugby league in the US and Canada, how I've definitely noticed, and I'm definitely enjoying it. And same in South America as well. So the quality level of those lesser nations and lesser leagues has definitely improved. That's a massive bonus. It's now about growing the talent pool and the youth and just non-professional amateur recreational teams at grassroots level, and as I call it, a community level, the community game. Um, but I don't know. I think there's been so many sports scandals over the last 20 years with with the growth of satellite TV and the growth in salaries and sponsorship dollar and everything like that. I think there's too much money in some sports and not enough in others. Um, but I think certain sports have peaked at the moment and are plateauing. But there could be that how do I put it, generational talent group that come through at the same time. There could be just a group of players that all come through at the same time in a sport that change the face of things. A lot of sports are getting younger and faster. I've noticed that in ice hockey. I've noticed it in rugby league and rugby union. I've noticed it in football to a certain extent, or what you would call soccer to a certain extent. I wouldn't say to the ultimate extent, to a certain extent. And I think, yeah, I think motorsport has yeah lost it for me. At like F1 and MotoGP. MotoGP again, it's just behind a paywall now. It's all subscription TV, which I think is wrong. Um, I used to love it watching it growing up, but yeah, I think motorsport is a transition from combustion to electric, and they've got a transition for the environmental impact. Absolutely, I think that's one of the bigger things. Um, and there's so many gimmicky regulations in motorsport that does my nut. That's putting me off more and more. I don't know. I think that's a difficult question. It's a very interesting debating point. I think individual leagues have definitely massively improved the talent level. Um, and I think ice hockey is one of those sports, and the growth of rugby union and rugby league in the US and Canada. There, I think where the growth is, and South America with rugby union as well. That's where I'm really glad I've seen the growth. Um, yeah, well, that's only 4 mile an hour. That's only 4 mile an hour. But again, same with cricket with fast bowlers. I mean, the fastest ball bowled now, I think, was 100. It was clocked at like 101 mile an hour. Fast bowler. That's a one-off ball. That's not an average. That's a one-off. Um, and that is an interesting one. I didn't know that, but I don't follow baseball. Like, I've done Major League Baseball videos, and I will look into the possibility of like, why doesn't Major League Baseball have a salary cap, considering that the rest of the major leagues and the minor leagues as well, because of Major League Soccer and Major League Rugby, obviously expanding and growing and chipping away in the same time frame that Major League Baseball was played in the summer. If Major League Baseball was to have a player strike or a lockout, Major League Rugby and Major League Soccer and the new North American Rugby League will be summer leagues. Well, will be a summer league. They play in the same time frame as Major League Baseball because of weather conditions, and to make sure all available pitches are available and played on, because winter in Canada, Jesus Christ, and winter in the Midwest and the prairie states for the US, it's not pleasant. Um, Major League Baseball, I think, is the major league at most at risk of losing ground to the other major leagues. So you've got the big four: Major League Soccer, then Major League Rugby. Um, they could, if you've got, if you have fans who are got nothing to do in the summer, and you've got other leagues that are active and are watchable, and you can, and you can go to games. Um, you're gonna, Atlanta has got a Major League Soccer and a Major League Rugby franchises. So if the let's say the Atlanta Braves just won the World Series, that's great for the city of Atlanta. It's brilliant. It's a massive sports market. The NHL screwed up there twice. How, I don't know, but they did. Um, but let's say the Major League Baseball goes on to a player strike or a lockout. Let's go for this. Atlanta FC sell out that stadium. They sell it out. I think it's the Mercedes Dome, I think, isn't it, where the Atlanta Falcons play. They get 70,000 plus for a home game. They've only been in the league, I think, 4 years, and they've already got sellout crowds. Atlanta also have a team in Major League Rugby that admittedly play in a smaller stadium, and obviously it's a newer sport. But Atlanta is a sports city. It's one of the biggest markets in the US. It's one of the biggest sports markets globally because it's encompassing the wider Georgia area. Um, it's an interesting one. Talking about the bowling average, or pitching average in this case in baseball, the steroid scandal. They The steroid scandal was going on from the 60s to the early 2000s. Yet they've got faster. How clean is baseball? Seriously. Is it just down to coaching and technique? Or is there some other foul forces at play? Because we know what baseball's done in the past. I've been asked this: who wins Man City, Man United? I think it's going to be a draw today. I think it's going to be a draw. It's just one of those games where the form leading in mixed with both. They've dropped points and they've not had the best European games recently. They've lost ground on their rivals. I'm going for a draw. This is where it's going to be a massive blowout win for City or United, and one of the teams is going to turn it on. But I think I'm going to go for a 2-all, maybe a 1-all. It's going to be a draw. I think. I don't think there's a winner. I think it's a draw, but I could be wrong. But it's it's a derby match that's grown in importance in the last 15 years, where it stagnated for the previous 30. So it's one of them where we'll see what comes of it, but Man City aren't the Man City they were in previous seasons, and Man United manager under pressure and a squad under pressure as well for inconsistent and poor performances. And Man City have shown some weaknesses as well. So for me, that is a draw, just brewing. It's just brewing for a draw, unless well, it could be who scores first wins. But it's I think it's going to be a draw. Um, if Major League Baseball was to go on a player strike or have a lockout, which is looking very likely down the track because of no salary cap and the imbalance within the league, and in the COVID period there was a disagreement between the Major League MLB PA and the league owners and all sorts. Major League Rugby and Major League Soccer could steal fans from Major League Baseball who may not want to go back. That's the crux of it. Is when the NHL had the lockout by 405, Canadian fans flocked to the CFL. Most of them came back, not all. They went to the rival league that plays in their country. They went and looked at the NBA and Major League Baseball, and some fans did not come back. And that's a risk you take when like you're competing for fans' money, and especially with America. America's interesting as in its sporting culture. It's very, very interesting. But fans are buying into Major League Soccer. Fans are buying into Major League Rugby. Fans, you know, are buying into overseas sports massively. They're very interested in what happens in European football. Got nothing to do with the US, but they buy into it. Um, so, and then you've got the collegiate programs as well, and the minor leagues. So if Major League Baseball was to have issues, which I think are highly likely, and looking at the history of player labour disputes with them in the league, um, I'm surprised we haven't had a player strike in recent times, but they've had a lot. The 70s and the 80s was disastrous for Major League Baseball. Absolutely disastrous if you're looking at labour relations. Um, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what actually plays out with Major League Baseball in regards to a salary cap at some point, because I don't think the current system they have in place is going to last much longer, considering that all the other major leagues have got salary caps. I can't see how much longer that can last. But then the players have got to be willing to possibly take a haircut on their salaries and at top end. Fans bought into the Korean pro baseball in the early days of the pandemic. Yeah, because it was being played. It was being played. Um, and then when the global sporting calendar shut down, the first league to restart was the NRL, and there was a lot of viewers in the US. They bought in, and ironically, that boosted the NRL's profits over losses. The NRL was expecting to have massive losses and have a flat salary cap or a reduced salary cap for 5 years. That's turned out not to be the case because of the growth in the US market. The US and Canadian markets saw that there's a league being played. It doesn't matter what sport, we'll watch it. And then the AFL followed suit a couple of weeks later. And the AFL and the NRL have had massive growth and interest in the US that hasn't just gone, right, our leagues are back again. We're not interested anymore. They are staying interested in the NRL and the AFL. They are staying interested. And that is something that, because over here in Europe, we have, you know, a different sporting culture in regards to, the clubs are community based. There's promotion relegation for the most part, and not all leagues, but most leagues. Um, you know, the, the leagues are historical. The clubs are historical for the most part. There's a couple of newer teams that have been either mergers or relocations or expansions, but for the most part, the teams that play in the leagues have got lots of history. They're well established. The governing bodies are well established. The structures have been in place for a very, very long time. When the pandemic hit, yeah, there was a lot of restlessness from sports fans, a lot, and then esports came along, and a lot of people just immersed themselves during lockdown in fantasy esports leagues and stuff like that, which was a good escape. But then when sport started to return, um, yeah, I don't know what it is about European sports fans, especially British sports fans, but we complain a lot. Um, a lot of complaining. Just be happy that you got any sport at all. This is what I say to people. Be happy you got any sport at all. But it depends what sports you like. I mean, as a North American, I think you've mentioned before what your favourite. You're more of a baseball fan. But if baseball was to go on like a player strike, what sport would you watch? If baseball was, shut down, what would you watch? Look, New Zealand doesn't matter if it's league or union, and rugby league and rugby union are different things. I'm just going to put that out there. They are different things completely. It's fanatical, almost like a religion out there. And then cricket comes a close second to both codes of rugby. It is fanatical out there. It's part of the sporting culture. For such a small nation, I think about 5 million people in total, to be the world's best cricket team in all formats, in my opinion, and in both codes of rugby to be in the men's and women's game regularly ranked world number one or world number two in the world. For such a small nation to have such an impact on three international sports that are played globally, and to be world leaders in that, tells you all you need to know about the culture and the sporting culture of New Zealand. I find it really interesting that New Zealand didn't, adopt And the same with Australia to a certain point, association football or soccer as they would call it and as you would call it, considering that they are British colonies. Same with Canada as well. But I think ice hockey suits the Canadian climate. But I'm very, very surprised how, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, the rugby codes as sports, union and league, union in South Africa, but league in both Australia and New Zealand, and union. Yeah, really, really interesting. India and Pakistan is cricket, but field hockey is actually more popular, ironically. But cricket, yeah, it's some really interesting, you know, questions there. Cycling is more of a French-driven sport, pro cycling. It is interesting, but it's to do with the European empires. So the French Empire and the British Empire were very competitive in Africa. The Portuguese and Spanish as well, and the Germans to a certain extent, and the Italians. Very, very interesting how in the sporting world, a lot of the sports federations at the top level are based in France because they were the drivers behind the IOC and the drivers behind the Olympics. And a lot of the team professional sports are British in history, and a lot of the Olympic amateur sports are French in history in the sense of organisation and governance. Very interesting that. If you didn't have France and Britain and their colonial empires in the 19th century, you don't have the Olympic Games, you don't have FIFA, you don't have the IOC, you don't have the IIHF in ice hockey, you don't have the International Athletics Association Federation, where it is, IAAF. Um, Key behind that is on the amateur side of sports, the French are influential, and on the professional side of sports, the British are influential. And then what happens in North America with what we now have as the major leagues and all that, that's a different evolution of sport. Um, but yeah, it's just really interesting how the driving force behind sport is England, is Britain and France. And then other nations, you know, adopt those sports that we are the driving forces behind, and then make them better. Yeah, yeah, about that. Hmm. We invent them, the French regulate them, and then the rest of the world makes them better. There you go. Couldn't make it up, could you? Humour aside, um, it is interesting, yeah, that the driving force behind the Olympics and the driving force behind international football, and to a certain extent international rugby, with a lot of input from Britain, is France. Without these two nations and their competitiveness against each other, but then their cooperation with each other in the 20th and 21st centuries and the end of the Victorian era, so the end of the 19th century, don't have um, you don't have international competition at what it is today. Um, for all the pros and cons of that. The reason why cricket works in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka very well, is the weather conditions are very conducive to having long dry periods. Um, Field hockey as well, very popular in India and Pakistan. They do very well at the Olympics. They do very well at the Commonwealth Games. Have a lot of world class players, and they are the most popular sports. If you were to go to India or Pakistan, you're more likely to actually watch a field hockey game professionally than cricket. Cricket is the second sport in India, which surprises a lot of people. Second sport in Pakistan as well. Pakistan is where 75% of hockey sticks are made, just in Karachi. It's something I learned at school. It's because of the wood they use, and yeah. But no, in regards to a lot of things that we've discussed, it is growing. Yes, you've got the Indian. There's a version of like the IPL, like the Indian Premier League football. It is growing. There's a massive fan base of the Premier League and the European leagues. That is true. That's been the case for a long time. And you've got the Venkies owning Blackburn Rovers, so there is actually Indian money in British football. Now, as a Blackburn fan, I have my criticisms of the Venkies ownership, and they are brutal on this channel. We do not like them, and their mismanagement. They're learning their lessons though by keeping Tony Mowbray in charge. But yes, field hockey is more amateur. It hasn't got the same professional basis that other team sports have, and it's more of a university game in Europe and the Commonwealth. It is more played at university. There are professional leagues out there. It doesn't get, I think, the exposure it should do, and that's my personal opinion. I think it's a great sport. That's my personal opinion. I think it is a great team sport. I used to play it at school. Um, it's fun to play. At the same time, yes, it could do with more exposure. It could absolutely do with more exposure on TV and in the media. And it could use a bit more professionalism in its ranks. But it is mostly played at university, which is where a lot of the British team come through. Um, but it would be nice, yeah, to see it get a more professional foundation and more support, more media coverage because it is a very very good sport for both men and women. Yeah, it. We've been producing quality players for a long time. Australia and New Zealand have got some quality players they've been producing for a long time. India and Pakistan is just a production line because it's so well played out there. I've watched a bit of handball. I have at the Olympics, and it is very popular in Europe, especially in the former Yugoslavia. Montenegro, I think, is the national sport. Is handball. Just putting it out there. Montenegro is the national sport. Don't ask me why. It has to do with Tito's Yugoslavia in the 60s and 70s during the Cold War. But it's one of those sports that I think, yeah, it's an indoor sport. You need to have that infrastructure in place, and I think in Eastern Europe it is played at school as well. So there's a lot of youth participation, and that's a key for a sport to be successful is to get, especially at amateur and grassroots and education in schools. Um, that's where I think it's key. Um, is to have school teams and youth playing, and then you get the adults playing as well because they go. Your parents watch the kids play at tournaments. They go, oh, you know what? Okay, let's form a handball association. Let's form a community club for a Sunday game or something or a Saturday league, and then that's how it grows. But yeah, outside of the Balkans, outside of Montenegro, it's not very popular. It is well, I Australia is a sports mad country. Same with New Zealand. Same with South Africa. Like sport is religion in these countries. It's an escape from poverty for a lot of people in South Africa, especially football, soccer in the townships. Cricket and rugby union are in our South Africa are like the Springboks and the Proteas are like considered deities, and they are national heroes. Doesn't matter what background you are. When it comes to Australia, sports my country. It really is. It's part of the culture. It's an outgoing, outdoorsy kind of culture where you once you get out of the towns and cities, you are literally in the wilderness. Like you have to be physically active. Same with Canada. Canada's a sports mad country as well. Um, it's so underexplored. So again, you've got to be physically active in some of these countries just to not to survive, but to it's just how it is. Like especially if you live in rural areas, you've got to be physically active. Like you could be 20, 30 miles from the nearest next farm. You know, um, I think that's changing in South Africa. It's definitely changing. There has been a shift. I'm not disputing that. Cricket, especially, I think, is played across society. Namibia, not so much. Namibia is actually very, very interesting as a microcosm. Very, very interesting country. Sparsely populated, only a couple of population centres. But if you look at the best Namibian players, they go to university. They get scouted by the universities and the private schools in South Africa. And and it's definitely Namibia is an interesting country because it didn't suffer the results of apartheid as badly as South Africa has in post-apartheid. There's been no racial hatred in Namibia. I know a couple of Namibians. It's a country I want to go and visit. Um, it's one of those countries is very interesting. Zimbabwe's different. Zimbabwe, we don't talk about Zimbabwe, the Mugabe era, and what was South Rhodesia, and the conflict there, and that's damaged the country, I think, irreparably, personally. But it is what it is. But Namibia is interesting. Namibia is very, very interesting, and I do think uh, it's definitely, obviously, on a global scale, it's a small sporting nation, but it's a very physically active nation, and they take great pride in their cricket and rugby teams, and even their football team as well. The Namibians of all parts of society participate in sport because it's a very physically active country because you've got vast high veld, cattle farms in central highlands of Namibia, and it's one of those countries where you have to be very physically active to survive. Basically, it's got a massive mining industry, and it's got a massive agricultural industry. That's how it survives. It's wilderness otherwise. It's definitely something that, yeah, Namibia is a country I want to visit. It's very interesting and diverse country. Um, and it's the complete opposite to South Africa in the sense that South Africa's got a lot of social division. Namibia doesn't have that. Namibians of all backgrounds. You look at the rugby union side. Every strata of society is represented in that rugby union test side. Um, and Whenever they're at the World Cup, I want to see them progress. I want to see them, improve. I have a little soft spot. I like their kit as well. I like the Namibian national kit. It's actually quite good. They've had a couple of. I mean, Jacques Berger. If you follow rugby union, just Jacques Berger is possibly was the best number 7 flanker the world has ever seen. Richie McCaw, eat your heart out. This guy was a beast at the breakdown. Beast. He had the best tackle technique. He appeared on British TV as well, where I think it was a rugby union show. They had Jack Berger up discussing tackle technique, safe tackle technique, breakdown, ruck, maul, leadership skills, handling skills. Jacques Berger, I mean, this guy had like both knees replaced. His face was just like it looked like a Picasso painting. One of the most mobile and most hardest hitting tacklers in the game, Jacques Berger. Um, Absolute beast of a player. Of course, he's now retired. He's gone back to Namibia. He's still involved in rugby union. He's gone back to his family farm. Very humble man. He's very, very. He's got a good sense of humour as well. Um, he's very humble. He's a very interesting character. Jacques Berger, for me, possibly the best flanker the world has ever seen. But because he played for Namibia and not one of the bigger nations, he sort of gets overlooked. What if I could visit any stadium in the world? Which one would it be? Um, I would like to see the AFL Grand Final at the MCG in Melbourne. That's on my bucket list. I want to go to Madison Square Garden, partly because my best friend Sam, he's a massive Rangers fan, and it is the oldest NHL arena in current use from its current iteration. I think it's been going since the '60s in its current location. I think it's the third Madison Square Garden. It has been recently upgraded. They did. They have a very. There are some good Namibians playing professionally in South Africa and in England in the county game. I think they just scatter themselves around the world, and they play for the love of the game. Same with the rugby union players; they play for the love of the game, and the football players as well. They play for the love of the game, and that's why I enjoy watching them play when they're at the World Cup. It's because they're playing for the love of the game. They know they're not going to win the tournament, but they are privileged in the fact that they're there, and they want to grow their sports domestically. And yeah, they play for the love of the game. and you can see the joy in their faces when they're playing um, and competing. They play with a lot of pride, and they don't shy away, especially in rugby union. They don't shy away from the battle. They know they're not the best nation out there. They know they're probably the weakest ranked nation at the World Cup rugby union wise. But my God, they put a shift in. They don't back down. They try, and that's what I like to see. Is people go, oh, it's Namibia playing against a tier one nation. They're going to get battered. Yeah, but you look at it. They're playing for the love of the game. If it's not for these people, you don't have the sport you have. And they had, you know, and maybe one day they might get test status. You know, Ireland have got test status and they've got less professional players, so and less player base. So Namibia, I think, deserve test status in cricket. Personally, I think they'll batter Ireland in a test match. But it's a difficult one because it's such a small population size and the money side of things. The best players would have to leave Namibia and seek professional employment mostly in South Africa, but as I say, some Namibians have ended up in Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, plying their trade. I think France in rugby union as well. So they've ended up all over the world. I think a couple of Namibians are playing in Major League Rugby as well. They end up scattering all over the world. And yeah, just look at Jacques Berger and his highlights reel. The guy, if you want to learn about tackle technique in rugby union, watch what Jack Berger does did on a daily basis in the English Premiership. He destroyed people, but he wasn't a dirty player. That's the thing. He wasn't a dirty player. He was so physical, but he was so good at what he did because of his technique. And when they talk about body technique in a ruck or a maul, again, he was great at winning you the ball back in contact and just throwing himself into contact. Um, But if you want to see a player who's not, he wasn't the biggest forward, but the contact he gets and the physical power he puts through the opposition, if he's lined a player up, you know that player is going to have his ribs rattled. And I forget the fly half. I think it was Charlie Hodgson got absolutely annihilated. It was Sale. I think Sale were playing Saracens when it was still London Saracens about a decade ago, and he lines up Charlie Hodgson, another international player. If Johnny Wilson hadn't been fly half in 2003, Charlie Hodgson is the fly half of the World Cup. Do we win the World Cup? That's another debate. And Charlie Hodgson could take a hit. My God, he just snaps him in half. And it's a clean hit. It's a clean tackle. You couldn't ask for a better tackle technique. Absolutely annihilates him. Partly because Charlie Hodgson has a shocking pass he's got to receive. And he has to stop and get the ball. And he's just hits him straight through. Perfect axis. Oh, it was just fun to watch. Ooh, that so yeah, when I got asked the question what sports have improved, I think individual nations have improved and individual leagues have improved in quality and in growth. Um, but sports in general, I think we might have peaked at talent level in certain sports, unless massive either rule changes happen or there's a generational group of players come through at the same time, be it at the same club or different clubs, to then in the team game to in club sport to change the face of a game of a sport. But yeah, no, Jacques Berger. That was my youth growing up watching him play. Absolutely brilliant player. The 2011 World Cup, I think, is where I realised who Jack Berger was, and that's 10 years ago. Oh, that made an impact upon me as a I was what I just not long turned 21. I was still playing the game as an amateur, and yeah, Jack Berger. I just stopped playing rugby because of injury, but Jack Berger, that just he's never give up, never die attitude. You know, he would play for 80 minutes. He would just he would if you want a player to lead by example and lead in the dressing room, so not only be a leader on the field but off the field. Bosh. My dad was a Harlequins fan when it came to rugby union. I'm a bit obviously London Irish playing locally. I had a soft spot for them for many years. Exeter Chiefs. I've got friends who live in Exeter, so I've got a soft spot for them and what they've done in the last decade. But I don't really have a team that I support in rugby union at the club game. Uh, but my dad was a Harlequins fan, um, and he used to wear his Harlequins jersey all the time. He wore it till it fell apart. Um, I believe my dad might have actually played some trial matches for Harlequins in the 80s and early 90s because my dad did play rugby for the army. Um, my dad was a very good sportsman. I forget what position he played actually in rugby. I think he was a flanker. I think he was a number 7 because he was short and stocky and very powerful. My dad played football at left back for a right footer playing left back. Very odd that. So my dad was a multi-sports. My dad played non-league football for Dorchester Town and played youth football for Dorchester Town when he was growing up. And then when he was 17, he joined the army. So he gave up his potential career in football. Um, and yeah, he ended up playing football and rugby for the army and athletics. His dad, my granddad, played field hockey for England. I think at the Commonwealth Games, which I found, and also was a runner and used to do middle distance running and beat Roger Bannister in a 4 minute, 4 second mile. 6 months before Roger Bannister did the 4 minute mile. So there's a bit of history, family history. My other granddad played a couple of non league games for Stevenage back in the day and wasn't very good. Just putting it out there. My granddad. But no, my dad played rugby for the army. I've got some of my dad's army rugby photos somewhere where he's actually in the played for the Royal Engineer Regiment. Um, no, yeah, my dad. I asked my dad's partner after his funeral, "Can I have his Harlequins jersey?" She went, "Yeah, that fell apart." I was like, "No." It's like, "Yeah, no, we don't have it anymore." He wore it till literally bits fell off. We couldn't get it to get him to get a brand new one. He wouldn't get rid of it. I was like, "Oh God." Um, but yeah, no, my dad was a Harlequins fan. My ex partner a long time ago used to live by London Irish's training ground in Sunbury on Thames, which is just on the edge of West London. And London Irish used to play at the Meadeys. Well, I think might still play at the Meadeyski for their club games in Reading. So I've seen a lot. I've got a connection with London Irish because some of my mates support them. But yeah, that's interesting, union, yeah. That is going back some, because obviously that would be what's your uncle's name? And I'll do a bit of research on him if he plays union for Australia. Do a bit of research, something I could put down in my notebook. But yeah, no, my dad played. Yeah, I think my dad played Army Navy as well, which is an annual game that's played at Twickenham between the Navy team and the Army team. And my old maths teacher played the Oxford Cambridge rugby at the Twickenham as well because you have the boat race and you have the rugby as well. Um, but yeah, no, my dad was a Harlequins fan. I just remember his jersey as a kid growing up. And Will Carling obviously played for the Harlequins, and I went to school with Will Carling's oldest son. There you go. There's one for you. And if you follow the Bristol Bears, Max Laheath, he was in my year at school, and I had some classes with him. And he was a flanker growing up. He's now a prop. So yeah, but the Harlequin story is just interesting because my dad just wore this jersey. Like it was really battered by the end. I mean, literally, the thing was falling apart. I think he did some. I think he played some trial matches or some pre-season games with Harlequins and yeah, I think he did. I'm not sure. I know he played for the army, and I know he was a massive Harlequins fan. And growing up, I remember what was the Five Nations, which is now the Six Nations, when Thomas Castagnier did the drop goal. I think in 1990. I think it was it 94 or 95 to win the Grand Slam, and it was England and France were going for the Grand Slam, and Thomas Castagnier, who I think is one of the most interesting French players because not only could he play scrum half, he could play fly half, he could play fullback, and he could play on the wing. And they even tried him at outside centre in a test match once, which didn't go very well because he was really small and Jonah Lomu ran him over. I seem to remember. But Thomas Castagnier, I think, is one of my favourite players growing up, simply because of that drop goal in, I think it was 95 at Twickenham. It might have been at the Parc des Princes, and it was for the Grand Slam. And his celebration when he drops that goal and he sticks his tongue out and he just yeah. He played a long time for Toulouse in the French league. Thomas Castaigned, one of the best players of the 90s and early 2000s. Thomas Castaigned, and now as a commentator, um, when the Six Nations was on, he's got his very sick French accent. But Thomas Castaigned is possibly for me one of the best players of my youth. I might have to do a video on Thomas Castaigned. Um, because yeah, growing up watching him play was brilliant. I've met Ben Cohen, I've met Steve Thompson, I've met Jason Leonards, Sir Clive Woodward. I've met him a few times. Very when you meet rugby players, they're very interesting, especially not so much now, but in the early days of professionalism, I think they were more humble than what they are now, in my personal opinion. Again, I just don't know. I mean, obviously, people go to the public school boys game, private school, state school, rugby league. Not that's a misnomer. Um, Historically, yes, but not so much now. But no, I enjoyed rugby growing up playing it. But no, my favourite players growing up were Thomas Castaigned, Brian O'Driscoll, Bod, possibly one of the best outside centres the game has ever seen. Um, uh, Jack Berger, I think, is my favourite forward. Jack Berger, just as a flanker, goes under the radar because he played nationally for Namibia. Rugby league, Martin Afire. If you want to watch rugby league, Martin Chariots Afire was his nickname. One of the best wingers rugby league has ever seen. Scored 10 tries in a match against Leeds in the Challenge Cup. And two of those tries, his teammates were like, hey, just go. I mean, I could score, but have the ball. And when he scores his 10th try, it's an absolute mockery of Leeds' defence. And Leeds were a very good side. So Martin Afire, I think, is one of the best rugby league wingers. Jason Robinson, how he could just be a support runner from fullback. Defensively, Jason Robinson wasn't the strongest and under the high ball. But if Jason Robinson was to be playing today, he would be very similar to what's his name, Christian Wade, who's gone to the Buffalo Bills. Very small in stature, very quick, and great at kick returns. You didn't want to kick to Jason Robinson, much like Christian Wade, because they've got such pace and manoeuvrability, they can just go past you. Adrian Morley in rugby league, that's, I think, my favourite rugby league forward, just because the guy's an animal. And most first grade games in the modern era, not Cameron Smith, that a lot of NRL fans bang his drum, but Adrian Morley had a longer career and probably a more brutal career and more suspensions than I think any other player I can think of. Cooper Cronk is my favourite halfback if you're watching rugby league, even though he played for Queensland, which is. But Cooper Cronk, he's brilliant. Future, how he's not on the stat chart outside the Melbourne Storm's ground is beyond me. But yeah, I think I just didn't. I mean, a lot of fans were very critical of this season's NRL season. Liam Kirk, yes, I do. The Arizona Coyotes, he'll get game time. He's playing very well in the AHL for Tucson. Point per game player in the World Championships. I think he's a point per game player at the moment in the AHL. I expect him to get game time. If not, if Arizona are going to do a complete tank, they might do a lot of trades. Adrian Morley is probably the most Yorkshire man out there, honestly. He's very down to earth, actually. If you watch his interviews, he's not overly arrogant. James Graham, the ultimate scouser. Well, he's actually from St Helens. James Graham, I think, definitely. I like James Graham. He's very thoughtful. He's very intelligent. He's more into. People think rugby league players, football players, some rugby they're a bit thick. They're not. James Graham. Oh God, City won it already. That's not surprising. James Graham and Adrian Morley, I would have them over like Sam Burgess and Jamie Peacock, for example. I like Jamie Peacock. Don't get me wrong. Jamie Peacock is a brilliant player. But I would have Adrian Morley and James Graham in my front row. No, I wouldn't have Sam Burgess in my front row, my second row. I'd have Adrian Morley and James Graham. Um, that'd be my opinion. I just Adrian Morley's a beast on the field, but actually he's very humble off it and very down to earth off the field, which is what he runs his own company. He runs his own recruitment company in heavy industry. So he's still a club ambassador for the Warrington Wolves. But guess what? Adrian Morley's not actually from Yorkshire. He's actually from Salford. He's from Greater Manchester. Just going to put it out there. He's originally from Greater Manchester, but he couldn't be more Yorkshire if he tried. James Graham is brilliant as well. Um, on the field, very passionate players. Yeah, I mean, Adrian Morley was a bit of an animal and liked getting suspended a little bit, but off the field, Adrian Morley is, from all the interviews I've seen and everything spoken about him, um, from ex players, teammates, and rivals, he's exceptionally humble off the field. Complete contrast to Sam Burgess. I wouldn't have Sam Burgess in my team. Um, I would, if I'm going to pick me favourite 13, Adrian Morley is definitely my starting prop. Just James Graham, Adrian Morley, and Cameron Smith would be my front row. Just Cameron Smith would just wind up the opposition and dictate play, and then you've got two absolute bloody hulks of front row forwards smashing a path. Um, but no, Adrian Morley's got the quickest send off in rugby league international history, like 4 seconds. First tackle of the game, he decapitates the Aussie player. Um, some of them I can't repeat on here because I don't want to get a ban or a sanction from the powers that be at Google. I've heard some really funny ones. I think you would have to go to a match over here or in Europe to really understand how passionate European sports fans are when it comes to like rugby union, rugby league, football, um, ice hockey. You would have to definitely um, experience it for yourself. Um, some of the chants I can't. When I was going to ice hockey, I've obviously had long hair before, and I was growing my hair at the time, a couple of years back in 2017, 2018. I didn't cut my hair for nearly 2 years, and there was a player playing for a rival team that had a bit of a mullet that was down his back. And when I say a mullet, he properly had a mullet, like an 80s ponytail mullet. And I would scream out, "My mullet's better than yours," or "Marty McSorley phoned the 80s. He wants his mullet back." Um, and I country's the most passionate in what sport? Because if we're talking football, South America is another world altogether. And when it comes to football, Europe is just as a continent is insane. Um, uh, no, some of the Eastern European fans are pretty mental. If we're talking football, it's oh yeah. I mean, this is I last cut my hair middle of August last year, so I haven't had a haircut. I was completely skinhead. I think I cut my hair on the 24th of August last year. You can see on YouTube. You can see the day before and the day after I cut my hair. Um, I had my hair at a similar length this time in August last year, and I haven't cut my hair since. So it's now November. Shit, about 13, 14 months. I think it's nearly 14 months of growth. Not the longest I've had it. Like, it's not the longest. I'm still growing. It's definitely big, but it's not the longest I've had it. I've had it longer. Football fans, South America is definitely just another world. But continental Europe and the UK again, um, you, the stadiums are never quite. I mean, I'm watching an FA Cup game. Oh yeah, they're going to grow for a while. There's an FA Cup game on the live TV in like what 4 hours. I mean, I'm going to stop this stream at 1 o'clock because I'm actually going to watch some horse racing for the first time in a while. I like my horse racing. I haven't watched in a while. Um, but yeah, no, I would say European football and South American football is just a different beast. And European rugby, to a certain extent, they start going as well. And French fans are known to turn on the team. French rugby union fans can definitely, doesn't matter if it's club or international, if the team are having a bit of a wobble and they're the home team, the fans will turn on them very quickly. Um, I think North American sports have a long way to go to completely and fully understand like how fanatical we get at team sports, like proper fanatical. Um, some of the chants I can't repeat. Some of the witty. I come up with some very the ice hockey. I've been known to come out with some very witty when it's a quiet period and there's a quite a bit of atmosphere. I will come out with some funny one-liners. Like there was one that actually got a quite a response. It almost got me thrown out. Um, the refereeing was terrible. Okay, in this ice hockey match, the refereeing was absolutely diabolical. Um, and I screamed at a ref, "Are you fucking pregnant?" I think this is a good one. I'm going to say this because I think I can get away with this one. I went, "Ref, are you fucking pregnant? You've missed 2 periods." Just let that sink in. That I think was the best one I've come out with. Is, "Ref, are you fucking pregnant? You've missed 2 periods." I think that was the best one I ever came out with at an ice hockey game. And I got in a bit of trouble for that, and I was told to not do that again. So I didn't. But that was, I think, the best chant I've ever got up. And it was dead quiet. The whole arena was quiet at the time. There was a lot of like scream of the red. There was a lot of you know. Both sets of fans were getting frustrated with the refereeing standard. So I said, "Sod it. I've had 12 pints. I'm quite drunk." This is back when I was drinking heavily. And my mate Rob was stood next to me, and he was like, "Don't do it." And my mate Sam and his partner at the time, they were sat with me. And so they're like, "Don't do it, don't do it." And I was like, "I'm 10 pints in. Like, I'm drinking some very strong European lager, so very strong alcohol." I'm quite pissed, drunk, and I just came out with it. Another good one I've come out with is one of our players. The opposition kept calling him a donkey, and I went, "Yes, a donkey he may be, but he's our fucking donkey." I've come out with a few. I was at a football match, and this is years ago when Leeds United got relegated out of the Premier League. They were playing Southampton, and their star player at the time was Alan Smith, the younger Alan. There's two Alan Smiths that have played professional football, and the younger of the two. And this is when he had his bleach blonde hair, and he scored 2 goals. They're 3-0 down to Southampton, and he scored 2 goals. It's 3-2, and then he broke a guy's leg, got sent off. And then the chant was because the chairman at the time was Peter Risdale, and he had got them in financial difficulty. And we were chanting, "There's only one Peter Risdale. There's only one Peter Risdale. La 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 la. You guys are financially fucked." Um, that's another one. Anything to do with Wayne Rooney and lock up your grannies or your mums. Can't really repeat some of them because they get a bit colourful. And I think I've got away with what I can get away with on this live stream by "Ref, are you pregnant? You've missed 2 periods." I think that has to be possibly the best one-liner I've ever come out with at a professional sports event. The thing was, there was like 2,500 people there, and I was quite drunk, and the crowd had gone to this murmuring kind of frustration with the refereeing, and I just went, "Ref, are you fucking pregnant? You've missed 2 periods." And I got a massive roar of approval from everyone. There was a few like, "There's kids here. You shouldn't be saying that." And I was like, "I'm drunk. I don't care." But yeah, I have to admit that's possibly one of the best ones I've ever come out with. I think I did that That was about 5, 6 years ago. I came out with that little number, maybe 7 years ago. It was a long time ago. I was so drunk at the time. It was ridiculous. I was barely standing up, but I came out with that one. There was also a match where me and my mate Sam came up with the 12 Days of Christmas hockey song. Um, and we got the whole arena singing our hockey Christmas song, the 12 Days of Hockey. That was quite a good one. I can't remember how it goes now. Um, I think I had it written down. I wrote it down, and me and my friend Sam, we were in London, and it was a very long. It was sort of like my birthday kind of present kind of thing. I mean, we'd gone to another game, but it was sort of like my birthday present thing. And we came up with the 12 days of hockey because it was the Christmas game, and that got some good good response. There was a smaller crowd at that game, but that was a good one. I remember that one quite fondly. But yeah, just I've just had some really fun days out with sport. I'm a Blackburn fan, and my late granddad took me to a Burnley Watford FA Cup game, and we were sat in the Burnley away end of Vicarage Road, and I was wearing my my Blackburn jersey, and I got a lot of abuse, and um, and I took it quite well. I was lucky to actually leave the ground alive by the end of the game, I think. Um, but I did come out with some good ones. And my granddad had a perverse pleasure in watching me suffer. They were actually lobbing things at me at one point, and I just came. I forget what I was only 14. I came out with something really funny, and but yeah, that was a good one. I have to admit that was quite tongue in cheek. That was quite fun. Always defence is a mess. Shabbat and Zabian. Um, they're still technically. I would say they're still technically in a bit of a rebuild phase. They've got cap space, and with like, for example, obviously you've got Jack Eichel has gone to Vegas, and when he's off IR, that's going to be interesting because they've got several players on long-term injury reserve. Toronto are in trouble as well in the cap. Tampa have got cap issue. I can see some more trades taking place, and I can see if Ottawa are still around like the wild card spots before the trade deadline, they might add um, a defenseman, but they might call up a defenseman from the AHL. So in that one, I don't know on that one. I'm not saying they had a decent. They've been competitive to start the season. They're not completely getting like destroyed every game. They've won games. They're competitive. They're an outside shot to make a wild card spot. If they're still competitive by the trade deadline, I can see them adding. I can see them possibly getting a defenseman in before then. But you've got to be aware. I think a third of the league is in basic salary cap hell, and they're trying to use long-term injured reserve (LTIR) as a way around cap problems. So like Tampa, Toronto, Vegas. So in that regard, I don't think you should split them up because then well, I can see Ottawa either calling up a player from the AHL or making some trades for pieces, and they might get a defenseman back. There's a few good defensemen flying around. There's a few players who are free agents in the summer who are defensemen who maybe a short-term contract, get to the end of the season, get them through, but they're still a young team, so you want to get the team chemistry right. It's all about the team chemistry and the philosophy and the culture to get them to that next step. But they're an outside chance for a playoff spot. But it's still early in the season. We're not even at the end of November yet, so it's still early. The Winter Olympics, obviously, at the moment, is still going ahead, and the NHL is still going. So that could be interesting. If do they suspend trades during the Winter Olympic? um, break. Um, we may see some additions before then. We may see a flurry of activity. I think the Jack Eichel trade definitely has moved things around a bit, and Vegas may have to move some more pieces to get under the cap when he comes back. So we may see why partly because the salary cap is flat, and well, not completely flat, but is a reduced cap than what they were expecting in growth. And a lot of good defensemen have just come through at the same time, and a lot of teams are lacking that defensive depth because of players retiring, going back over to Europe, long-term injured reserve, expansion as well. I think has definitely had an impact. So, and with a third of the league in salary cap issues, and from next season onwards, more teams getting into what we call salary cap hell, with a lesser growth of the salary cap. Some teams like the Senators and like Seattle have a lot of cap, and Arizona have lots of cap space, and um, and Arizona in a rebuild, or also are coming out of a rebuild, and Seattle are an expansion team. They have a lot of cap space. I can see some bad contracts and a lot of player movement happening between now and the trade deadline, and especially with the Olympics coming up, I could see movement happening before the Olympics. This is where I think Liam Kirk gets game time at Arizona because there's going to be injuries, there's going to be COVID protocols where players have to sit out. He is going to get called up. He's playing very well in the AHL, played very well at the World Championships. He's going to get some game time. He may be used as a trade piece as well because I can see Arizona being forced to take a bad contract. In exchange, they're going to have to give up pieces. Or they may go, okay, this year we're tearing it down, but we can have that guy before the trade deadline, re sign him as a free agent or an unrestricted free agent come July. But we're going to have to give up prospects and pieces to go the other way. And if Liam Kirk keeps playing well and the right people are scouting him, he could end up at an organisation that he's more likely to get game time up. It's one of them. The market for defensemen, though, I think the Eric Carlson trade is interesting, and Dustin Bufflin retiring is interesting, and the fact Winnipeg decided to go, oh, we're going to dismantle our entire defence corps in the off season, have one defenseman left out of seven. Yeah, we're going to do that. Couple of years. We're going to do that. 2019 season. We're going to basically just get rid of our defence, and I just held my head in my hands. The problem was, in 2018 we get to the conference final, and in 2019 we were back in the playoffs again. So we were a playoff team, and we were trying to keep Patrick Laine, which we didn't in the end. So our defence corps was blown up to keep a player we then traded. But what I find interesting is the 2016 draft class. Austin Matthews can't get out the first round. Patrick Laine had a good season and a half, and then basically just was useless. And Pierre-Luc Dubois suddenly, a full pre-season with a team that values him, suddenly he's the best out of the three when it comes to point production this season. Overall, Lionels have more playoff games and playoff goals and points, partly due to the 2018 run to the conference final. But that 2016 draft class, Austin Matthews overall is the best player. But Dubois, I think, is the most improved player, and Laine is the biggest. Oh God, his attitude stinks, which it does. I thought he was underrated, and I do think he is still underrated. But his attitude is absolutely appalling. But a lot of the young players now in the social media generation, their attitude sucks. Their attitude sucks. Their entry level contracts are higher now than what they were before the lockout in 2004, 2005. So they're getting paid more, and the social media generation, their attitude is entitled is full of entitlement, and it sucks. It sucks. A lot of these young players, their attitude sucks. But I've been watching the NHL since I was like 3 years old, so I've seen it in the dead puck era. I've seen the end of Gretzky's and Lemieux's careers. So I've been lucky to see Gretzky, Lemieux, Messier, Coffey, Grant Fuhr, Richter, both Bure brothers, the Sedins. I've been lucky to see some of the So, Jaromir Jager has been playing the entire time I've been alive. His professional career is my lifetime, which is 32 years. He's been a professional hockey player. He's still playing. Ridiculous. I love Jaromir Jager. Partly why I've got the money. Um, I did do a Jager mullet for a while. The Carlson trade is nuts to look back on. Got third overall pick, Stitzler, Norris, current first, and Tierney, currently there. I did a video on that trade. It's on the channel. Um, it is on the channel. Um, the Eric Carlson trade to San Jose, and I do break it down. And it is interesting what those three players. I think did DeMello go to Ottawa as well? If I remember correctly, he's not there anymore. I think he's with the Jets now, or he was with the Jets. I don't think all the pieces that moved are still there apart from Carlson. There were other pieces that moved that have now gone on to do other things. I think DeMello has moved on. He has moved on. I think he's played for the Jets now, or he was playing for the Jets for a while. I don't know if he's still there. I don't know where he's playing now. Great. Anyway, I'm going to go watch some horse racing now. Some really interesting questions. There'll be an FA Cup review up after the FA Cup game. I'll be watching this evening, and then after that, I might do a live stream on the other channel, the History Boffin. So if you are still with us in the evening this evening, stay tuned. Keep your eyes open. The other channel, there may be a live stream. I'll be discussing lots of things that aren't sport related, and they may be sport related. So I might mention what's happening at Yorkshire in the NHL with Chicago and how that's a cultural thing that needs to change, um, and talking about the ongoing John Deere and Kellogg strikes in the US and labour shortages in Europe. It's interesting. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts, obviously, below. I'll have some more videos for you soon. And of course, there'll be a live stream on the History Boffin this evening, my time, about 8 o'clock ish. So in about 7 hours. So in 7 hours' time, just hop onto the other channel. I'll probably be ranting and raving about politics and economics and society's problems and Greta, because pain in the arse she is. But there you go. Thank you very much for watching. I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.